both of the meetings. At this time, we'll hear from the public. I'll recognize if you raise your hand, I'll recognize you. If you haven't already filled out a speaker card, we'd like you to fill out a speaker card before you leave. Who'd like to speak first? Yes, sir, come forward. Oh, for the record, Councilman Orleans and Councilman Wynn are both out of town with business. They would have loved to have been here, but business calls them elsewhere.
I thought this was a different flyer when I picked it up. Hello, Mayor, City Council.
You can come to the speaker up here, the microphone up here.
That's probably easier. I don't want to turn my back on you all, but I don't want to turn my back on you guys either. So let me do it this way. Hello, Mayor, City Council, staff. My name is Joe Piontek. I live at 2785 Roxburgh Drive in Willow Springs. I was the HOA president over there for a few years, and while you all know this and maybe they don't, I currently sit on the Planning Commission. I came to speak in favor of the Unified Development Code tonight. I have been to some of the meetings. I don't think anybody could go to all of them, and yet I know that Councilwoman Diamond, sorry. There were 33 meetings about this Vision 2030. Then there were more meetings about the vision for Roswell, where you all developed a great vision statement for the city. And then there were meeting after meeting of how we were going to build or rebuild this zoning code to fit with our new vision of the city. The problem with the old zoning code was that it was developed 50 years ago, as you all know. I mean, this was farmland, and we always hear in our meetings people come in and they say, well, you know, when I moved to Roswell, maybe I should establish my cred. I've been here for 40 years, and I went to Mimosa, and I used to play in Vickery Creek, and I've crossed the river at Shallow Ford many times. But, you know, and it was wide open when we came here. Unfortunately, y'all didn't follow the Fight Club rules. You're not supposed to talk about Roswell, right? Now everybody wants to come here. We've got 80,000 residents. We got another 20,000 that are coming in the next 10 years. So, or maybe 20 years, but that's going to require a place to put everybody. The 80,000 don't want to leave. The 20,000 need someplace to stay. So what are we going to do about that? Now, I have heard several times that the UDC, if passed, would produce tremendous amounts of apartments, or multifamily residential, as they call it in the code. Nothing could be further from the truth. There will be not one single more apartment than there is right now. Every piece of multifamily residential will have to go through the same process that it does now, the legislative process. It's not going to just be left to staff to say, oh, sure, go put an apartment down there, or go up to Stroop Road and put up, you know, an RS9. It's got to have the approval. Now, I'll show you what they gave me. Special. They gave me a map, and then they gave me this. This is the Unified Development Code, but it was in its form on July 25th. On Saturday, we all came in, and we spent the day going through this page by page again, and I meant to throw this out because it was useless for the day. It has changed so much from the July version to the September 28 version that this was useless. And I told staff not to print me anymore, that I would rather just go through it on my iPad, because it's easier. Actually, you can flip from place to place in it very easily. So my point here is to say there's been a lot of work. This has been a very open process. There's been meeting after meeting. We had an open house before a planning commission 2 weeks ago. Not a soul. We had an all-day meeting on Saturday. 3 people came. This is the time to be heard about the UDC. Come to the open houses. Ask the questions. It is a very open process. It's an iterative process. And finally, I figured out how to blame this all on Pug Mabry, if you're interested. When they were putting the interchanges on 400, now I've heard this story 2 different ways. When they were putting the interchanges on 400, they came to the mayor and they said, how many interchanges would you like going into Roswell? He wanted to maintain the small town feel that we have now, and he said, can I say none? I said, no, you got to have at least one. So that's why we have one way into Roswell and one way out. And that's the Holcomb Bridge corridor, and that's what my wife fights every morning trying to get into Buckhead. And something's got to change, and the only way to change it is to give our developers what is a toolkit. These are tools that they will use to build new kinds of properties, right? These are new places that don't exist in the code. So give us a chance, give it a read first of all right? And then come to the meetings and give your input to the mayor and the council. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Who wishes to speak next? Yes, come forward, please. I forgot to remind everybody, when you begin your presentation, you'll give us your name and address. And there are no time limits on the people.
I'm well aware of that. Thank you, Mayor. My name is Janet Russell. I live at 260 Willow Springs Drive. That is not in Willow Springs subdivision. I live on the corridor of State Route 9. I've lived in this home for 40 years. Like Mr. Piantek, I've lived here for 40 years, but I wasn't going to grammar school. I was a college graduate and moved here as a mother and a working woman. I have a couple of things I'd like to correct with Mr. Piantek. I believe our population is 92,000. And the current zoning code is not 50 years old because I was here when it was written, and it's approximately 30 years old. At that time, I argued with City Council about what they were doing with the zoning. No one listened because I didn't have an engineering degree. Silly me, I only had a degree in English and medieval and Byzantine history. I was just a dumb homemaker and told to go home and bake cookies. So I have a couple of things to say tonight, so sit back and relax, folks. The mayor can't have the police escort me out tonight. First of all, I want to congratulate Chief Ricky Spencer on getting the award for the state fire chief of the state of Georgia.
Let's have a hand for Chief Spencer.
Chief Spencer, I've known him for a long, long time. He does a great job as the population of this town has increased. The demands on our first responders get greater and greater. He is a well-paid chief of police. No one will argue with that. A chief of fire. No one will argue with that, but he earns every dime. I would like to see the rest of our first responders as well-paid. Unfortunately, our police are the second poorest paid in all of North Fulton municipalities, and I think that's an embarrassment to our community. That said, I don't know what happened this Thursday morning, but all hell broke loose on Highway 9 because at 7 a.m. the firemen, the policemen, and the ambulances started roaring southbound on 9. I heard it from my house, and I thought, oh dear, I have to take Marta. By the way, Mr. Piantek, you know that commute that your wife makes from to Buckhead? May I suggest she use Marta? She won't sit on Georgia 400. It's very convenient, and it costs $2.50 in each direction and makes very little harm to our environment. There was a MARTA meeting prior to this one tonight. All hell broke loose, and I sat and waited for 45 minutes for the numbers 85 bus, which meant I missed 2 trains, and I was on my way to Emory University. I don't know what else to say except that our police, our fire, and our EMTs are working really, 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 really hard these days. And we give them photo opportunities, and we give them little rewards like have your picture taken with us. We give them special recognitions. We need to give them a raise, folks. We need to give them a big raise so that they can afford to live in our community and they don't have to have 3 and 4 jobs so that they never see their families. This city is rich and it likes to pride itself on being this fabulous place to live. Well, you show it by how you treat your employees, and our first responders need to be treated with the respect they deserve by being paid what they deserve. Now, to those of you that I forwarded the email about the Faces of War Memorial, none of you responded except Mrs. Price. I want to thank you for that inattention. You must be really, really busy. The Faces of War Memorial sits on this City Hall grounds, and I was the only female on that committee with Vietnam veterans to build that memorial 16 years ago with all donations from private funds. Those little bricks you see on the path are the names of the people that donated it. I had been in Vietnam as a civilian female working for the Military Airlift Command, so when the guys decided they needed to do this, I said, I'm in. It's the centerpiece of a place to come and be quiet in Roswell. Veterans organizations come here and remember their friends who have passed away either through the war or war-related injuries. From Vietnam to the Korea to Iraq to Iran, you know, war goes on and on and on and on and on. We can no more win a war than we can win an earthquake. However, two things about this. Last January, you voted to spend $457,000 of money that we got from MARTA to put in sidewalks that go to the back of this building so that the people that come to Canton Street can eat, have a place to park, and they don't have to pay for a valet. So the MARTA money, which was for MARTA passengers, became money to support people who drive their cars. It starts over here at the Triangle, and they put in a new sign recently, and I was stopped in front of it, those historic black poles, you know, that have the little black signs that are supposed to look historic. And I noticed that there is a sign for north parking, south parking, and City Hall. Less than 50 feet away is the back of the Faces of War Memorial, but there's no sign telling you where it is. So I sent Mr. Asenbrack an email, and he responded very quickly and said, "I'm sorry, but the city has issues with too much signage." And I said, well, you know, what's more important? Telling people where to park or reminding people about the people who suffered 50 years ago in a war? I still have no reply. And I'm really, really, really extremely disappointed that you would find a place that you always focus on when it's Memorial Day, where we spend $40,000 between the Rotary and the City of Roswell to put on the big Memorial Day celebration, and we brag about it. And when we had the 9/11 ceremony, it was very appropriate, 35 minutes in front of the Faces of War Memorial. But you can't put up a sign to tell people that it's there? Why? Are we trying to disrupt their illusion that they live in utopia? People died. That's what that memorial is for. I have brought at least a dozen visitors in the last month from all over the world, and you know, I tell them I'm giving them a historic Roswell tour, the unabridged edition, because I'm neither Southern nor black, so I have no bone to pick. I tell them like it is. And I always bring them to this memorial because it's one of the few in the United States and one of the only ones in the state of Georgia. So why is the city so reticent to let people know with a small black sign, Faces of War Memorial? None of you except Mrs. Price even bothered to respond to my query. Not one. But I don't believe anybody up there was ever in the military, so that's not surprising. I call you Patriot Lights, kind of like a Bud Light. So I'm still wondering, we got sidewalks for people that drive their cars to Canton Street using bus money, but you can't put the sign up. Tells me where your priorities are. All foam, no beer. All flaps, no throttle. Now, I heard by way of the grapevine that I know the Rotary wanted to put in the Walk of Valor here on the City Hall grounds. For those of you who haven't been here before, that was going to be 8 memorials to 8 wars. Because, you know, war isn't special enough. We have to have lots of memorials. There was no decision as to which wars, to designs, or anything else. I reminded this council that that land was given in perpetuity by the city council, by the city of Roswell, to the Faces of War Memorial, and I doubted if it could be changed. No one knew that because none of you were up there except Mr. Orleans on council when that memorial was built. But I heard by way of the grapevine the other day, and you know, my grapevine, I throw a really wide net in this town. I know where all the bodies are buried. I've heard that you're going to put some sort of 8 memorials on the Smith Plantation grounds in the Boxwood Gardens. The Smith Plantation? You want to put 8 memorials that are totally inappropriate on a historic site that people come to Roswell to see? I have news for you folks. People do not come to Roswell because we have coals. They do not say, hey, let's get our money together and go shopping at Home Depot. We're from China and we made all that stuff. They come to see those 3 historic houses and the old original section. I met 3 men and I brought them out here that were making the last episode of the Hunger Games. So I gave them a little 4-hour tour and they loved seeing our city. The one comment they had, which I thought was funny, was they thought Canton Street was a tourist trap from Los Angeles. But believe it or not, they thought it was a tourist trap. The rest of it they thought was very authentic. As you know, I'm in the tourism business for 35 years. And the one refrain I get over and over and over and over again from my clients is, we're searching for the authentic. We don't want manufactured. That's easy. So I don't know what you're thinking over there with the Smith Plantation, but you want to take out historic Boxwood Gardens and put in yet another project? We don't need that. Besides, which war? The war on poverty? The war on drugs? The war on women? Which war? I don't know. My next comment is about the pedestrian bridge going across the river. I brought that up a couple years ago because none of you walk anywhere and you don't live there. But I've attempted to walk across that bridge numerous times, and I've made it actually a couple times. I defied the odds. I didn't get killed. The walk is this wide and it's metal. If you lose your balance or a car comes too close, you are toast. You are dead. So I brought it up and I said, you know, in Alameda, California, it's an island, it's a bridge that goes up and down. They've made it simple. They just added little pedestrian things on the sides of the car bridge. No, that wasn't good enough. Okay? We're going to do a pedestrian bridge across the river. So I said, okay. You know, I sat on the Historic Gateway Committee, volunteer for 15 months. Twice a month we met. I finally saw where it was going to sort of connect both sides of the river, but I never saw really any specific designs for the bridge. So I heard about it, and again, poor Mr. Asenbrack gets all my emails, and he always replies. But I remember very distinctly sitting in the City Council chamber, and you approved $50,000 to pay a consultant to design a bridge. Not to build it, just to design it. And I thought, gee, we have some of the finest engineers in the world, in the country, at North Avenue at Georgia Tech. Why don't you go get 2 master's degree students, have them do it as their thesis project, pay them each 10 grand, they got their master's taken care of, and you've gotten a big PR promo. Wow, we hired 2 Georgia Tech graduates. Nah. Instead, we hired some consultants. Now, I've heard through the grapevine that we well exceeded the $50,000 that you allocated for a design. When I saw the design, Mr. Asenbrack asked me how I liked it. I thought it was interesting but unremarkable. I noted 2 things. There's no cover. There's no place for pedestrians to seek shelter when they're walking across that river. A storm comes up, and God knows we've had the rain of the year, of the century this summer. For those of you who try to take a bus, which is none of you, you will not know the thrill of standing for 40 minutes in a downpour with no place to seek shelter, because this council took $1,645,000 of MARTA money, but only spent $250,000 of it on shelters. None. You will never know what it's like to be going to work, standing in the rain, with nowhere to go. So I asked Mr. Asenbrack also, why not? And he said, oh, we had some designs, but we opted for not the cover. And I said, who's we? Nobody asked me. It was my idea. We need a pedestrian bridge. No answer. I also asked if there would be lights on the bridge, because this is not for people that have just driven to the 15 parking spaces that we paid $200,000 for 2 months ago. The land to make 15 parking spaces so they can go, ooh, let's go see nature and hike. No, this is for people that are walking to the grocery store, that are walking to jobs, that are getting off the bus. They are walking for life. They need lighting on the bridge at night. I doubt if we'll see it because, you know, pedestrians, we don't really need them. We like them. That's why we're going to do all this density in here. We want to cram them and pack them in so they can walk everywhere, but we won't provide them with sidewalks or lighting. Now, the final thing is UDC. I think we all can agree that SR9 is just a slum. It's a blight from Norcross Street all the way to Holcomb Bridge. I lived here when they wanted to redo it, and they were going to call it the Neon Zone. Anybody here remember the Neon Zone? That was a clever name. They wanted to make it like the Japanese Ginza Strip. It was going to be fabulous, just right in that Roswell vein. For those of you who don't remember it, ask me later. I have a memory like an elephant. It's horrible, and I always asked, why are those shopping centers so far back from the street? 1,000-car parking lot for 8 stores. If everybody came in their own car, you wouldn't fill those stores. Well, it was the model of the 60s and the 70s, and that's what they did. And I said, some years ago, I had been in Berkeley, and they changed the whole direction of Telegraph and Shattuck Avenue by pulling all the stores up to the sidewalks. Changed the personality of Shattuck Avenue, where the university is. Because people could then look in windows and actually see something. No pedestrian is going to walk from that area we developed on Holcomb Bridge with money through an empty 1,000-car parking lot to look in a store. Nobody. It isn't happening. So we wonder why they're blighted? Well, the other reason is there are no tax incentives for people who own those shopping centers if they're already paid for. They write them off their taxes as a loss every year, so they don't really care if they're occupied or not, if there's potholes, if they're ugly. They don't care. You haven't done anything about that. Your idea of redevelopment is pack them and stack them and rack in the money. That's all you think about. Do I think you've not been thoughtful? Yes, you have been thoughtful. Individually, I think you're all really nice people. I tell people all the time, nobody on my council is a thief or corrupt. Nah, they're okay people. But you lack vision and you lack comprehension on what the future can hold when you work together. The fact that you have 2 consultants who plan sidewalk projects and the sidewalks don't meet, they're like from her to me, and you say, excuse me, why? Well, my project ended where she is and my project ended where I am. But they don't connect. That is symbolic of everything going on in this city. Nobody is talking to anybody else about projects. It's like puzzle pieces that don't connect. They don't articulate. So you don't know what it is. Consequently, Alpharetta is now called Awesome Alpharetta for a reason. For some reason, you all have decided that density in the center corridor is the answer to our prayers. This area you've neglected for as long as I've lived here is now the answer to your prayers. You're going to pack them in. Well, there was a man, Mr. Piontek, wherever he went, he suggested that I go to the meeting. And I went to the meeting, and I looked at the diagrams and the drawings, and I'm a really good hearer. And I talked to the man afterward who was in the consulting firm from Austin, Texas, the guy that looked like he had the Harry Potter glasses on. Little stripy ones, Mr. Personality. Boy, he could have just sold a dead man 2 pairs of pants. But you see, I know how to sell a dead man 2 pairs of pants, so I listened. And when I told him where I lived, which is not in a subdivision, and by the way, there are only 4 protected subdivisions in this city that are absolutely unable to be changed. Brookfield West, Martin's Landing, Horseshoe Bend, and 1 other. That's what I was told. 5 or whatever. 10 now. Okay, well, I don't live in any of them, Miss Price. I live in what's called a neighborhood. So I was told by this man, I said, I live behind the coffee house, 50-year-old neighborhood. It's really nice. I walk to the corner and take the bus. And he said, well, your neighbor, they're 1/4-acre lots. That was the minimum lot size when they built my house 50 years ago, 50-something years. If your neighbor wanted to knock that house down and put anything else in there and sell it and put in 2 or 3, whatever is allowed in that zoning, they don't even have to get permission. He told me that off the record. Boy, I didn't have to ask any, because there was no real Q&A at those events, by the way. It's just pictures, and then you break off into groups, because in Divide We Conquer. I'm not reading from any script tonight. There was a lot of email going around about scripted comments. Anybody who knows me knows that I don't read anybody's script. I write my own. I'm really, really, really disappointed in this UDC because all it addresses is rezoning for housing. It makes no mention of services or infrastructure. None. I've been begging for years. I've cried, I've cajoled, I've smiled, I tried to be nice. It's really hard when someone's saying, too bad. We spent $200,000 on 8/10 of 1 acre of land near Allenbrook to put in 15 parking spaces, and I think by my estimation of $10 a linear foot, we could have put in 20 miles of sidewalks in Roswell. Still, we don't have any sidewalks on Highway 9. As I come home, there's a power pole, a power pole, a power pole. And then in between there's the ones that give us Christmas in July, with all the X's and the O's. So, I'm really disappointed because, Fraser Street that's right over here? You guys are worried about 4, 6, and 10 units? 35 units per acre over there. 35 units. Now, Lennar was here and I was here, and they said, we're focusing on the young urban professional and the baby boomer. And I informed them that the baby boomer doesn't spend $2,500 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment on Norcross Street. We might spend $4,000 for a Paris apartment, but that ain't happening on Norcross Street. And he said we were going to love it because we could walk to Canton Street and eat, and the other news flash was we don't eat out. We like to eat in. Eating out is a special event, not once a day. For those women and men who don't want to cook anymore, 2 words, Trader Joe's. No one cooks if they don't want to, but they don't eat out. So They spent all that money on a marketing person, and they could have just called me. I'd like to see some of this density spread out. I'd like to see it on Stroop Road. Maybe 150 units, right next to the mayor's log cabin. And until they do that, what I'd really like to see is that 350-foot radio tower on his property. I'm sure it could cover the west side of Roswell, and it wouldn't impact very many people, just the mayor. And it's not that bad. That's what they told me when there was 20,000 gallons of raw sewage that exploded at the river 3 years ago, and the guy from Fulton County told me, but it's not that bad. I said, then you know what? We'll get this backhoe, we'll put it in the dump truck, and we'll take it to your front yard. And we'll dump it in your front yard and invite your grandchildren to come and play in it, because it's not that bad. So it's the same thing. It's always the NIMBY virus. It's good for everybody else, but not in my backyard. People everywhere that I have spoken to, and it's not an official survey, are appalled at what you are going to allow happen on Fraser Street. Appalled. Now, it's a fait accompli, which is the French for slam dunk. I did the calculations, and you're going to have, with 450 cars parked there, 2 trips a day, over 1 year, 500,000 more car trips on Norcross Street, not counting the additional cars that will come from population growth, and not counting when you have so many cars you have to widen Norcross Street, which will make it more convenient for people to come off that one exit, 7B, to head home to Cobb County. So we can kiss Norcross Street and accessibility to the library goodbye. Because, you know, when you get to that little hill and facing Diesel Pizza, good luck. Now, I really, really, really would like to see some of these densities shared. We're such a sharing community. Let's share it with all of you who live in your gated communities and your long, long driveways. Instead of the poor people who live here, see, we don't have an HOA. That's the problem. Most of us that live in this center corridor, we're just neighbors. We just see each other. We don't have people telling us when to plant a plant. We just respect each other's neighborhoods, and we like it, and we live here. But we're really kind of tired of being run over or ignored. I bring a lot of visitors to Roswell, as you know. I speak a few languages. It seems like I'm always running into somebody, and I say, oh, come on. When they think of Roswell, they think of what's in this center corridor. Unfortunately, they don't think of Horseshoe Bend. They don't think of Old Alabama Road. They don't think of Highway 92. They think of what is here, and you are destroying it brick by brick by brick by brick. Pretty soon we'll just be like every other boring suburban city in America. You could be anywhere. Blink your eyes, you could be anywhere in America. People want authentic. If you'd like to have an idea of what 3-story buildings look like in a neighborhood, I rode the bus a lot this week, the bus and the train to Emory. I was at the Paul Simon Elman Lecture Writing Series. And I got to take the bus to the train to the number 6 bus, which goes down Lindbergh over to Clifton Road. And if you go down Lindbergh, right there is the Terra Cinema. We all know where that is, on the corner of Cheshire Bridge and Lindbergh. Take a look across the street from the Terra Cinema. There are 3-story brick buildings that Lennar Place wants to build, the ones that have the fake front porch, to give you that feeling you're in an urban community. Now, they actually look okay at Lindbergh, and there are some of those similar all the way over there on La Vista. But the scale is totally different. You're facing a public shopping center and a 6-lane road. You want to put 3 stories over here on Fraser Street? You want to put 3 and 4 stories on Oak Street? What are you people thinking? Hello? What are you thinking? Also, the people that think baby boomers are going to buy an apartment or live in an apartment that doesn't have an elevator, that has stairs, you've got to be nuts. None of us, between knee replacements, hip replacements, and broken ankles, nobody wants a place with stairs. And if you decide that your focus is the baby boomer market, you better increase your EMTs and ambulances. Because they require, there they are again. Because you hear ambulances all day long when people are older, and they'll be going to the hospital and nursing homes. Now, I'm not trying to be funny. I live that life. I'm the first of the baby boomers. I know exactly what people are doing. I know exactly how people live. Because I live the real life. And as I stood in the rain the other day, which has been a lot this summer, and I have a car. That's not the issue. All I could think of was, you know what, $1,645,000, and they only voted to spend $250 to pick up 10 shelters and a couple of poles with those camping chairs on them. And I was told, hey, those chairs are better than nothing. Well, you know, I've been in Zimbabwe. I sat on a rock. It's better than nothing, too. People are really, really tired, City Council. They're tired of your backroom negotiations. Not that you're crooked. They're tired of secret. They're tired of secret. Really tired of secret. And I don't think in my life I will ever forget Mr. Eigelhart 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when you were voting to defer the tower decision, the radio tower decision. I'll never forget it. Because this side voted yes. These three voted defer. Mrs. Price and I are not on the same page in a lot of places, but you know I always give her attagirl. When she deserves it, you know that, Betty, I do. Mr. Eigelhart practically pleaded on his knees. He came across like he was begging for someone's life on the gallows when he said, and I'm not being dramatic, you can look at the movie, please let's defer it, please, please, aren't you listening? And it was a slam dunk on this side and the mayor broke the tie. That needs to go on the record. He broke the tie in favor of the tower. Now, the tower is already done deal with Motorola, except that Fulton County's also done the same deal with Motorola. And so we're going to have 2 towers now, and as Fulton County residents, we get to pay for both of them. The Fulton County taxes and the City of Roswell. Except Johns Creek has opted out of the Fulton County Tower, and I'd sure like to know why. Because we're going to be providing them with service, but they don't have to pay. And the only place that gets the 3 towers is Roswell, because we're the industrial park. We could put them with all our used car lots and our bail on bonds. I've lived here a long time, and I really like Roswell, and I really value my First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. But these are really, really, really sad times, and you people need to understand that you are not in people's favor right now. Don't tell me, we have hard decisions and don't think we didn't think thoughtfully. No, you didn't. A lot of people that are living here are bailing. They are saying, I've had enough. I can't put up with it. And the newcomers you say who are moving here will stay about 2 years, pack it up and move on to go to the next place where they can suck it dry because they think they're living in utopia.
Hi, Mayor, Council. Gay Maloney. I lived at 615 South Shore Place, and that is Martin's Landing. I used to be president of Martin's Landing and president of South Shore, part of Martin's Landing. I, too, have lived in Roswell since 1971, so 42 years. I actually joined the Historical Society that was formed in 71. Became a part of it, gave tours. This is the heritage that this city needs to protect. Whenever we change anything, we must preserve that. It's just important, vital tourism, money that is good income. Having said that, I don't know, maybe 2002, 2003, somewhere in there, we had meetings where we were allowed to sit around all day in groups and tables and say how we'd like to see these big box shopping centers that were looking so ugly. We gave great feedback. Nothing happened. A year or two? That's new studies. Our old studies went out the window, new studies. And now we have another real problem, and I really agree with the lady that just spoke. I don't know her, but honest to goodness, with this new zoning, I'm quite concerned about Roswell, to the point that my husband and I have looked about moving out of Roswell. We do not want the density. Now, the other thing is we were allowed to speak, and I really applaud you for at least having this evening that we could speak, because recent bond meetings and so forth, you've just got up there and lectured, and we were dispersed as a group and we're not allowed to speak. So we would like to have our say. You need a check and balance system, and that's called community input. I'm going to quote from the Georgia Constitution, which states, "All government of right originates with the people, is founded upon their will only, and is instituted solely for the good of the whole. Public officers are the trustees and servants of the people, and are all times amenable to them." Now, I lack the speaking ability of our last two speakers, actually, so I am going to read. This, and most of this is taken from other people who have done studies. It says, "City leaders are in love with density, but most city dwellers disagree." And that, I read that because you're supposed to be operating at the will of the people. Mayors, planners, architects, and developers argue that when it comes to cities, bigger is better, and taller and denser are best of all. Only one problem: most of the people who live in those cities don't agree. These interests speak about cities if they were giant Lego constructions to be toyed with at the whim of the planners or developers. But they neglect the things that matter to people in their daily lives: privacy, room to raise children, the desire for a backyard, decent schools, and safe streets. Roughly 4 in 5 homebuyers, according to the 2011 study conducted by the National Association of Realtors and Smart Growth America, for example, prefer a single-family home, something that is detested by people that like density. They also, people that like density, say, "Oh, that makes our cities richer." But some of the nation's greatest wealth creators, Silicon Valley, is essentially suburban, and the world's wealthiest metropolitan areas, such as Hartford, Connecticut, is largely a collection of rustic towns and suburbs with low density. In addition, in nearly all urban cores have considerably higher unemployment rates than their much-diced suburban rivals. Overall, 80% of the last decade urban population growth came from people below the poverty line, compared with 1/3 in suburbs. Anybody going up Highway 9, Alpharetta Highway, has seen that area change. I don't think I need to say any more. The primary goal of a city should not be to make wealthy landlords and construction companies ever richer, or politicians more powerful. Instead, we should look for alternatives that conform to human needs and desires, particularly those of families. Urbanism should not be defined by the egos of planners, architects, politicians, or the upper rich, who can cherry-pick the best locales. Urbanism should be driven, above all, by what works best for the most people. I would like to address in general the potential for increase in the amounts of apartments in Roswell in the UDC as it is currently proposed. Roswell currently has 26 apartment complexes with approximately 8,600 units. Alpharetta has set as a matter of policy a ratio of no more than 1/3 apartments in their housing mix. Woodstock, who has just undertaken a major push for new apartments and high-density housing, had just passed a moratorium on more apartments because they are just now experiencing what can happen when you allow too many apartments. So now we have around 8,600 apartments. That includes the Fraser Street apartments, which were approved earlier this year to become new apartments. We all agree they need to be replaced, but they are being replaced with a 100% increase in the number of units on the ground. The new 30 units per acre density is something Roswell has never seen before and will have very specific impacts to Roswell. If we see anything near that density increase in other apartment complexes, we will see a substantial increase in apartments in Roswell. That is just from existing apartments. many of which I think we can all agree to do need changes. But is much higher density in those apartments what most people in Roswell really want to see? Are we considering the true impacts of what that would mean? If even 20% of existing apartments are redeveloped at that density, that could be an increase of nearly 2,000 new apartments. The UDC, as proposed, now adds a large number of areas that could have new apartments. I don't know how many here, but apartments will be an option to request in 1/3 of the new zoning categories. New apartments have not been an option in Roswell for a long time, for good reason. Most people in Roswell don't want to see a major increase in the number of apartments here. I do understand that the new apartments are not likely to be built in all these areas, and that they are being included under conditional approval, requiring council approval and the regular rezoning process. Why would we think, if we allow the possibility of something we haven't allowed in a long time, along with the current hot market for apartments, that we wouldn't get new applications for new apartments? And frankly, this council has already approved the only conditional use request for apartments it has seen, and has recently approved other relatively high-density developments in Roswell. So why would we think the conditional process offers much safety for Roswell? I've been a realtor who sells homes in Roswell. As a realtor, I believe in and stand behind home ownership. Along with other experts in the field, I read studies and reports to the benefit of having a financial stake in the community. The advantages of owning a home are both social and economical. National Association of Realtors in 2012 reported with the social benefits of home ownership and stable housing that home ownership boosts the educational performance of children, induces higher participation in civil and volunteering activity, improves health care outcomes, lower crime rates, and lessens welfare dependency. And these are just a small portion of the social benefits that everyone knows comes along with property ownership. Finally, a city has added value not only from a tax base, but from other improvements and attributes brought on by new residents that purchase in the community. Recently, the Wall Street Journal and other financial magazines reported the economical advantages when this happens. The increased revenue impact could be in tens of thousands annually from one household. What you see with apartments or apartment dwellers is directly opposite. There is no financial investment and the social trend's negative. These transitional occupants without a stake in the community have decreased test scores in schools and added increasing crime and pollution in those areas. In Roswell, we only need to look at the locations we call blighted to see examples of this. Each of these apartment complexes started out as luxury, and they are now responsible for the majority of our police department calls. We can argue that apartments only take away from a community and that they don't add value. Many other cities are trying to reduce the amount of apartments because they know these things. As I mentioned, other cities around us are placing moratoriums on new apartments, even after embarking on a program very much like what the UDC is opening up. I do not oppose any change in what we allow for apartments, as we will need some flexibility in working to redevelop our existing blighted apartments. But we need to have much more open discussion about opening up so many new areas to the possibility of new and additional apartments. Please do not pass this element of the UDC at this time. Let's consider much more carefully where we want to potentially allow apartments. Let's understand ahead of time what the implications are and not get caught like some of the cities around us after they've already been built. Thank you.
We heard this same argument when we approved the Fraser Street apartments, which went from a blighted community to which will be high-end apartments. I expect I will hear this same argument again. The UDC is not proposing any new territory for apartments that are not available for rezoning for apartments today. Let me repeat that. Today, any property owner can ask his property be rezoned for apartments. Whether it's on Stroop Road, where I live, on the other side of town, Any property owner has the legal right to ask for any zoning, which would include zoning apartments. UDC is not changing that. So the folks who would tell you that areas are being opened up for apartment zoning, which would not legally be available for apartment zoning today, do not understand the law. They may be well-intentioned, but they do not understand the law, nor the UDC. Next person who likes to talk, please.
And most of that's not true.
Councilman Eigelhart, you will be recognized if you raise your hand. Would you like to speak?
I would actually.
Councilmember Eigelhart, if you would like to take time from the people's meeting, you may.
But just real quick, because there are certain zoning categories in our zoning code that people are not allowed to rezone to today. Apartments are one of those. So you can rebuild existing apartments to their existing density at those current sites. You cannot ask for rezoning for apartments in any new locations. It's in the code. You can't do it for the R3, the RTHA, and the R4, which is apartments. You cannot rezone to those zoning codes today.
Yes, sir. Come forward, please. Well, you can ask me.
Good evening, City Council members, Mayor, City Manager. My name is Richard Marr. I live at 390 Hembry Road in Roswell, Georgia. I want to start this evening by saying I think it's great you honor Coach Tim McFarland as a former college athlete and member of the 1999 NCAA football championship. I played for Coach Bowden, and coaches have a great impact on young men's lives, so I think that's great you honor him this evening. The reason I'm here tonight is to seek assistance from City Council for a serious water problem. These water issues are impacting my property, my family's safety, and the citizens of Roswell. I'm here to ask for your help. My wife and I purchased our home in December 2012. Since then, our property has flooded repeatedly. The city permitted the construction of Saddlebrook Forest subdivision, which is adjacent to our property. Stormwater runs from 2 city roads in the subdivision into storm drain culverts. These culverts drain into a detention pond. A weir in the detention pond then releases the stormwater directly across our property. On the Saddlebrook Forest plat, it clearly states stormwater should not impact adjacent properties. The city also added an additional drainage system when residents of Saddlebrook Forest were flooding and further increased the flow of water across my property. Today, 3 storm drain culverts and pipes collect water, concentrate, and then discharge stormwater directly across my lot. The detention pond in Saddlebrook Forest has never been maintained with 30 years. The city has no easement to send stormwater across my property. Additionally, the city worked with residents of Saddlebrook Forest to regrade their lots due to basement flooding. The slope of these revised grades has increased additional flow of water onto my property. As a result of these actions, water floods my property from both the north and the west. The volume and rate of flow of this water is astonishing. Simply put, our 2 children would be washed away by the force of this water. This storm drain intrusion is causing serious erosion on my property. We've had to take significant repairs on to try to rectify this and stop the erosion. The stormwater the city has channeled across my property also flows into the historic Hembry Spring, which is located at the front of my property. I have met with the Historical Society on the significance of Hembry Spring. Hembry Spring is an originating water source for city residents and historic resources that should be protected. When stormwater is not impacting the spring, it is a beautiful, pristine resource. It is the headwaters that drain into the Foe Killer and Victory Big Creek. Today, stormwater from the city roads and infrastructure is causing sediment and other pollutants to destroy this important feature. To date, I have met with city personnel at least 4 times. I've corresponded repeatedly with those who I believe to rectify this problem. I have not been given any concrete action to remedy this situation on our property. I appeal to you tonight, City Council, to move this matter to your highest priority. A critical function of our elected government is to remedy situations like this one. Please consider what the city can do immediately to relieve me, my family, and continuing problem of the city stormwater onto our property. The protection of my property in Henry Spring is very important. I also ask you to ensure the city's water does not continue to damage my property, injure my family, or destroy the spring any longer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I don't know who to submit the card to. I do have written remarks because I'm not as clever as Janet. So my name is Joyce Cross. I'm 2300 12 Stones Drive. I live in one of the unprotected subdivisions under the UDC code, and I'll talk about that later. It is unfortunate, Mayor and City Council members, it is unfortunate Mr. Orleans and Ms. Wynn can't be here tonight to hear the concerns of the people who live here. I'm here to talk about two items affecting the quality of life and integrity of our neighborhoods. We would like some clarification on your vote September 11th to place a 350-foot tower in our neighborhood on Fouts Road. The agenda item simply stated on Fouts Road and no higher than 350 feet. Mayor Wood made a statement on the night of the vote indicating the 350-foot tower would be placed on the back of the lot. We would like some assurances in writing that your radio tower will not be in the fall zone of our neighborhood and our homes. When considering the fact that this body voted on December 12th, 2012 to join the intergovernmental agreement for a unified radio system, and that vote came with no clarification, at least we never heard, that it would result in 3 400-foot towers in Roswell, 2 of which slated for residential neighborhoods, to be near residential neighborhoods. It's clear that your plans need to be spelled out exactly for us to have any faith in your system. Perhaps if some of you had really understood the blight this tower would be on the Fouts neighborhood area and our park, some on the council might have given a real effort into looking into the fiber optic solution that would have lowered these towers. The reason given at the last meeting of not considering fiber optics is feeble at best, since the entire country is communicating using fiber optic connections with a high rate of success, and there are plenty of backup systems available to make such communication extremely reliable. In addition, we are appealing to you to remove Fouts Road as the master site location. The master site is presently centrally located in Sandy Springs in a landfill on Morgan Falls, I believe. If you insist on moving such an industrial monstrosity to Roswell, I would think the centrally located Hembry Road Fleet Yard would be a more acceptable spot. And I take issue with Ms. Love's assertions that Fouts Road is centrally located and has all the security needs for this project. Fouts Road is a heavily wooded, dead-end street with a neighborhood and a city park. We don't want the added traffic and congestion on this 2-lane street associated with the additional radio equipment and a larger metal barbed wire surrounded building there. As for the security, if your security was so superior in this area, then why are there so many signs up warning people about the dangers of leaving anything of value in your car? If your park rangers and police cannot keep criminals out of our cars, how are they ever going to keep your master site from harm? I also would like some clarification as to how much decision-making power this City Council has on issues regarding this tower system, because it appears you may have voted away your ability to make decisions in regards to the location of the master site when you voted in December of 2012 to join the North Fulton cities in a unified radio system. I know Ms. Wynn attended one of the North Fulton Regional Radio System Authority meetings, but has anyone else on this council attended one of those meetings? I have, and I can assure you there is no one there looking out for the interests of Roswell. In summary, I'd like to have a written confirmation as to the exact location of the 350-foot tower on the Fouts Road property. And secondly, I do not want the master site on Fouts Road. I also would like to know how much authority you really have as a council to govern what happens in this radio system in Roswell. Now I'm going to move on to the second issue with this council. It is your current plan to substantially increase the density through the Unified Development Code, and to me it is disturbing and quite scary. And if the big, fat, thick document that you left up here is now null and void because you've made all these changes just on Saturday, and this marketing plan is your new plan, then I think we definitely need to slow the train down. The UDC updating and codifying building and zoning codes for the city is not an issue. What is an issue is your UDC includes rezoning large tracts of land all around Roswell to provide major increases in density. The limited road improvements being considered do not address the gridlock we already have in our area, and adding high-density housing will make it impossible to leave our homes. Traffic, overcrowded schools, the limited water and sewer resources make this version of the UDC unworkable. Cities, and another lady mentioned this, cities such as Woodstock last month and Jonesboro in July have placed moratoriums on building of new apartments. Woodstock even limits apartments to 20% of its city's residential housing. Where are your limits in the UDC plan? Have they been added since Saturday? I sure would like to know. Whatever plan you decide on should include such limits. According to city-data.com, the percentage of rentals in the 30076 zip code, that's my zip code in East Roswell, is 34%. And by the way, only 5% of Alpharetta is in that zip code. So it's mostly East Roswell, and we've already got 34% apartments in that area, rentals. Dan Immergluck, a professor in the School of City and Regional Planning at Georgia Tech University, says sudden concentrations of rental properties can destabilize neighborhoods. Quote, "It leads to a lot of turnover, and fear drives more people out." Are you taking such issues into consideration when you plan on opening the door to 6 and 8 and 10-story buildings in Roswell? Why can't your UDC include percentage limits to high-density development? What happens when you pass the UDC and then you realize the area is gridlocked with overdevelopment and a big developer comes in and he meets your UDC design code? Could that developer take Roswell to court using your own UDC against you if the developer is turned down? I hope you're not getting your legal advice from a single source on this issue, because we all know how dangerous it is not getting varying sources of information. And how many legal opinions have you obtained on this issue? Why can't you increase the zoning density on a project-by-project basis so there can be public input and signs posted and this council can retain more control? Perhaps all those changes took place. I don't know. And maybe that's another reason to slow this down. What are your solutions for the impact on traffic, water, schools, sewers? What are the incentives in the UDC to redevelop the blighted areas of the city sooner rather than sometime in the murky future? The fact is, by opening up so many areas, it will be less likely that anyone will want to redevelop Roswell's troubled spots. Why would any developer choose to do so if they can just go down the street and make easy money by starting a new development? Finally, I must comment on your so-called public hearings on the UDC issue, where no one is allowed to ask a question but told to submit questions in writing. Well, I submitted some questions in writing in August, and I've yet to hear a response. Also, your meeting last Saturday was not very well publicized. Maybe that's why only 3 people showed up. Maybe you need some marketing and communications people to help you market so that people will know what you're doing and when. Where is your transparency? Janet is so right when she says people want authentic, and I don't think we're going to have authentic in Roswell anymore. And I can tell you, the first gentleman who spoke who said so many people tell other people how wonderful Roswell is. Well, I was one of those people once. I was one of those people. Well, you know what? I'm telling nobody to come here until this mess is straightened out. We believe you can do better as elected officials. We expect better from our elected officials, and I will continue to press for answers and communicate what I am learning about our elected officials to all my friends and neighbors here in Roswell. And I ask you to pass my comments along to those who are not here tonight, and to make it very simple for everybody, I've got my questions in writing, and maybe you can email me and send me some of the answers.
Mr. Mayor, while he's coming up, the lady who just spoke, if you'd like to give us your email address, we'd be able to reply, perhaps.
I have it. I'll be happy to give it.
Thank you.
Oh, I put it on the card.
Jeff Smith, 40 Wood Place. I know I'm in the minority here tonight, but I can assure you, Mayor and City Council, that I'm probably in the majority of Roswell when I can say that I think Roswell's been developed pretty well, and I think we're going in a pretty good direction. I think, like I said, people usually don't come out to these kind of things unless they got something to complain about. So I came to see Coach McFarland, but I thought I wanted to just weigh in. I coach at Roswell Rec. I coach baseball in the spring. I coach football in the fall. I know a lot of parents in Roswell. I know a lot of people in Roswell. I know a lot of people who love living in Roswell. They love to see what's happened in Canton Street. And by the way, they're pretty happy about the Lennar project. I talk to people all the time and around the metro Atlanta area, and everybody wants to move here. I know there's a lot of people that say they want to move out, but I talk to people all over metro Atlanta who want to come to the city of Roswell. There's a lot of reasons for that. We got great parks and recreation. We've got great natural resources. It's a great place to live. But people who keep talking about we're going to start pushing in more apartments, isn't the Lennar project replacing apartments? I mean, isn't that what it's replacing? So the only other thing I want to say about the UDC code is that, if you want, there's some places in Roswell, I don't think we're increasing density everywhere in Roswell. I think it's only in certain pockets, perhaps, that they may allow more density. But if you want to ask a developer, the city is not a developer. The city is a planning institution. It's a referee that makes the rules. But if you want people to come out and to develop, you have to make it economically viable. And so if you want redevelopment, you have to create rules that allow developers the ability to come in and do something that makes sense for them. They're not going to, if you want to develop your own property, you got to raise money and buy the property, and you can do what you want under city codes. So I think the UDC is headed in a great direction, and I applaud your efforts and everything that we've done with the city moving forward. I think it still is a great place to live, contrary to what I've heard here tonight. And I was born and raised here in Roswell. I grew up here in Roswell, and I'm going to continue living here and raise my 2 boys here in Roswell. So thank you very much.
My name is Russ DeLuca, and I live at 320 Tradia Tarn in Sentinel in the River Subdivision. I appreciate the chance to speak tonight. I would like to say one thing before I start talking about the UDC in general. The first speaker tonight talked about how many meetings have been held for people to provide input, and I attended 2 of those meetings. I was surprised by the fact that there was no question and answer session allowed at the meeting. I couldn't believe on such a subject that is such interest to so many people around the city that you wouldn't have a question and answer period. I just found that to be very troubling. Any event, I started looking into and trying to understand better about the UDC by looking at the comprehensive plan, the Roswell Comprehensive Plan 2030, and I read the summary that was published, I guess, trying to understand a little bit about what the background was. One of the questions that's actually on the city website right now talks about what does the city hope the UDC will accomplish? And I will quote specifically what the answer is. The answer says, we'll make the community more economically competitive by increasing the certainty of development process. It also hopes to improve the user experience for applicants, neighbors, and town officials. That is the entire answer to that question. Seems to me that the whole thing is about development as opposed to what's good about the quality of life in Roswell. I mean, we're talking here about a development code for the entire city, not just redevelopment. And the feelings, the perspective that people who are citizens and residents should be taken into account in terms of what you hope to accomplish with this UDC. Some redevelopment is certainly absolutely necessary. I don't oppose the UDC, and I don't oppose redevelopment of many areas. There's a lot of things, mixed-use developments with condos and townhomes, senior living communities and so forth would be excellent additions to the city. The question I have, though, is, and I understand we have apartments today and we have apartments in the zonings today, but what does a city council think is an appropriate level of apartments as a percentage of our housing in town? And what percentage of the redevelopment should be apartments as opposed to condos and townhomes? As some of the previous speakers have said, other towns are putting limits on the amount of apartments. My own perspective is people who own townhomes and condos are much more likely to be long-term productive people in the city as opposed to people who are here on a part-time basis and have little invested in the city. One of the examples today, which I was looking at the Groveway overlay that was approved by the City Council some time ago as a mixed-use development. It was cited as having medium-density villages and so forth, and that the area is right here around the City Hall. However, the first project that's been approved is 100% apartments. And that in and of itself isn't a crime or isn't a sin, but in fact, how can we depend on what the City Council is going to approve in the future if, when we have a mixed-use development that's been approved in this Groveway overlay, and which says it's going to be mixed use, and yet the first project is 100% apartments at twice the density of the apartments that they're replacing. My primary concern has to do with obviously the densities along Holcomb Bridge Road and along Highway 9, and in particular the nodes at where 400 and Holcomb Bridge cross and where Highway 9 and Holcomb Bridge cross. I see on the publicity sheet here that I was just reading that in fact the statement seems to be that there's no zoning differences in the UDC from what we have presently today. I guess I don't understand that, because when I looked at the maps that the city has drawn up, the commercial mixed use in those areas call for 8-story and 6-story buildings. And from my understanding, other than the old Charlie Brown plot, there are no other 8-story zoning allowances in the city presently. I may be wrong about that, but that's not my understanding of where we are today. Further, the RS4 on the new plots and the new UDC allows 10.9 units per acre. I don't find any concentration or density like that anywhere else on the existing zoning. One of the things that I asked in some private conversations, because there was no public questions at these recent meetings, one of the questions I had is, what about traffic? I mean, anytime I talk to anyone about the UDC or about Roswell, the first thing people talk about is traffic. You know, Holcomb Bridge Road, Old Alabama, Highway 9, Warsaw, those roads are clogged. I don't know how many of you ride on those at 7 or 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. I mean, the cars are stacked up, have to take 4, 5, 6 stoplights to get through every intersection. Now, one of the things that I had asked people about in these meetings was, what is the traffic implication of this new density? It seems to me that if we're doing something this significant to change the zoning or consolidate the zoning for the whole town, we would be looking at a holistic approach to what is the traffic situation, what's the school situation, what's the infrastructure situation to support this. But it doesn't seem to me that that's happening. I know that there's some plans to make some transportation improvements, exit to Georgia 400, an extra lane between Old Alabama and Georgia 400 going west on Holcomb Bridge. But these seem like Band-Aids by comparison to the kind of traffic we already have, much less what we will have with this increased density. The council has retained final approval for a lot of these development projects. I understand that change was made after some of the early meetings. However, it seems to me that a developer who meets the new zoning guideline, the new zoning things that are in the UDC and the design requirements, how could we refuse approval? I mean, in one of the meetings, I asked the question about what we have today in our existing zoning, and the answer was we'd be sued if we tried to change any of the zoning that exists today. So if we give people broader density zoning, how can we ever turn them down if they come in and ask for an approval? In summation, I'd just like to say that my view is that we ought to have a UDC that creates desirable design guidelines for what is going to be built in the city, that provides comprehensive and consistent list of existing zoning, that focuses on retaining Roswell's positive living environments, parks, nice amenities in the town, and so forth. The council can provide guidelines to developers about the type of projects that we might desire along Holcomb Bridge Road and Highway 9. Those projects should be approved one at a time based on the understanding of what the traffic improvements are over time in the city, how much high density has already been approved in place, and what the residents' view is of these new developments. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Linda Porter. I live at 720 Oak Haven Drive in Brookfield. And first of all, I guess I'd like to encourage a couple of our audience members to be as respectful as the rest of the folks were and listen and not talk over other people. There are 2 items. One is a tiny little item that I would like to broach with you folks, and that is, as crazy as it sounds, silt fencing. When I built my home 13 years ago, we had 3 rows of silt fencing because we were adjacent to a stream, which I had no problem with. We had to establish our landscaping and such, and then bring the city back out to review and remove our silt fencing, and that is a good thing. But on the property behind mine, there is 3 rows of silt fencing from prior construction, and the builder is long gone. It's a relatively undeveloped property, but it was from other areas. And I came to find out when I've talked with the development area several times that there are parameters, very solid ones, for where to install silt fencing and when it can be removed. but not when it is mandated to be removed. In other words, silt fencing can sit in a location forever and become pollution, when of course it's an effort to eliminate pollution. So it's just a thought to maybe expand our current parameters of use of silt fencing, installation, allowed removal, but we need mandatory removal as well. The second item is more important to me, and that is about speed and safety in the neighborhood of Brookfield. This city and our leaders have heard about this before. Brookfield has worked extensively in the past, specifically in 2000 when I was involved with the Department of Transportation, and addressed the issue of speed and safety in Brookfield. I know it may impact other neighborhoods as well, but the purpose of mentioning this today is to urge Department of Transportation or anybody else who will touch on this subject, and there is a renewed effort to address this issue in our neighborhood, but to encourage our leadership to pay very close attention to specifically the residents. I respect the leadership in Brookfield very much so, and thank them for what they do. But in 2000, our leadership single-handedly voted down the rights of our neighborhood to vote on speed impediment opportunities, ways to control speed. To be more specific, we have 1,000 residents, or almost 1,000 homes in our neighborhood, and instead of letting everybody vote on an option that was brought forth, the board voted against allowing us to vote. And it has been misstated since then that Brookfield already voted on speed control options. That is so far from the truth. And I am confident that our current leadership will not go that route, but I do not want to see that happen again. After speed control issues were voted not to be voted on, there was a car crash with 4 young men in it. 1 died, 3 were severely injured. I happened upon the crash the morning as I was walking, like I normally did, and the police were still there. I believe the crash happened at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And the first thing I asked was was anybody harmed, but were any pedestrians harmed? And it's because in Brookfield, pedestrians are at risk, severely at risk. You cannot walk the streets without truly fearing for your safety, and that should not happen in a neighborhood. There's a lot of speed control options. There are only some that will control speed in the long run, and that's what I'm for. There is currently an effort of signage in our neighborhood, and don't get me wrong, it might affect people for a few moments, but eventually they'll ignore it, kind of like the stop sign at my corner. But again, I'm asking you as leaders to, be careful as to how you respond to our needs, because twice so far, 2 past times, the little people have expressed interest in impacting this subject, and unfortunately, the little people got squashed. And it's very important that they be listened to before a child in a carriage walking down the street who was recently sideswiped by a car. Physically, the carriage was hit. Thank heaven the child was not hurt, but something more dangerous is going to happen. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and other citizens here. My name is Eric Broadwell. I live at 11140 West Road in Roswell. And I'm here to speak about the UDC and a few other things. But first, before I get to the UDC, I'd like to say I heard Janet talk about the pedestrian bridge, the bike pedestrian bridge that's going to be going over. And while I'd love for my alma mater to receive a study to do the bridge, Janet, they wouldn't be professional engineers, and you would need 6 years of experience before you could even get that. So I'd rather have a professional engineer than a college student design it. But I'm sure their ideas would be just as good. Also, in light of that bridge, we have Riverside Road. Right there has no bike lanes, no shoulders, and Riverside Park gets so many cyclists, and there's always interaction between the cyclists and the motorists there. I highly encourage that to happen. And Miss Linda, did you know the Director of Transportation lives in Brookfield? So you might want to go, I'm not saying do a sit-in at Steve's house or anything, but you might want to contact him. That may be a great way to get something done. I'm also, to let everybody know, I'm a director on the board of Cobb EMC, and Cobb EMC is a utility that serves also West Fulton, and I've been able to get your rates lowered twice while I was chairman of the Finance Committee. And I think a lot of the issues I'm hearing here tonight, especially the radio tower, I've been reading about this and hearing about this for a while. There's obviously no communication and nobody taking up the challenge to make sure that Fulton County, North Fulton cities are all coordinating together. And as I consider running for the Fulton County chairmanship or commissioner position, I think I could straighten that out, as I've done similar at Cobb EMC, straightening out that mess. But I'd like to talk about the UDC. I can remember when my kids first started at Mountain Park, I used to be able to claim and brag to everybody, we have no apartments and no townhomes in our school district. Well, that changed, and townhomes came in, and I was initially, bummed out. But as I saw the use of those townhomes and where they were placed, it seemed to work okay. But they also are townhomes, so they have owners, people that care about the community, that live there. Maybe people later in life that don't have kids anymore. Some of my friends moved from Wildwood Springs into those communities. It made sense to have a small portion to serve that community. In the UDC, if we're going to get more apartments and double apartments in Fraser Street, I think we would be better served in that particular area to have more of a walkable community that would service and help the businesses down on Canton Street and down here. We're still missing, and I know Janet has been complaining for many years, we don't have an in-town grocery store down here, like a Trader Joe's or something that would come into downtown area to service all the local residents here. Everybody has to get in their car and drive somewhere to go do their grocery shopping. So if we're going to have a walkable community, we need to look at all the services. But I do think the direction of the UDC, and obviously if it's all been changed since Saturday and what I was looking at may not have been accurate. I did a quick little cursory search. Forsyth County, Powder Springs, Douglas County, Henry County, Canton, Camden County, Cherokee, Gordon, Oconee, Valdosta, Ackworth, and Gainesville all have new UDC codes that they've just enacted and have gone down a similar path that we're going down. Now granted, Roswell's a little bit at a crossroads. We're going from small town environment to probably a little bit larger urban town, and we're trying to resist that urban town feeling. We want to stay small town, and just like everybody else here, I want to have it stay small town. I'm afraid that if we get too many apartments in the area, that we are going to get too much transient citizenship, where we would rather have a more stable base. We need to have some. I'm not saying we don't want any. There's always a need for that. People moving in town may need an apartment home to base in before they move into their house. I've seen that happen with several people I know. People that come into town that want to look at Roswell to live, they may need a temporary place before they select a specific spot within Roswell. But those types of people are a little bit different than your standard apartment dwellers. And I think the UDC is going in a great direction, but I do caution you. It looks like it's a lot of pictures, and we'd like to have it look this way and this way. But I think sometimes we may be trapped by that, and you have to look at the person who's doing the approval and the inspection and whether or not that's right. We don't want all those pictures to emulate a cookie-cutter picture of Roswell. We like the uniqueness of Roswell. We want to also be able to have the flexibility that if somebody's ingenuity, creativity, not everybody builds things the same. Maybe they don't fit the norm of the pictures of what's in the UDC, but maybe they fit within reason, and it creates that uniqueness within Roswell. And we would like to see that flexibility, and maybe we need something like a three-legged stool where we have a balance like in the rest of our government. We need a balance and some checks and balances to make sure that somebody at the lower level isn't disapproving something they shouldn't, or isn't approving something they shouldn't. So I think I realize you're going through a whole new code revamp, and granted, that's probably a good thing because it can get really, really cumbersome looking at old code and seeing how those traps get in there. And but I think we do need checks and balances, and I am really surprised to hear that the meetings you have on this don't have any interaction and interchange. And I can hear the meeting now because I've been in these meetings with my role at the EMC. Let's do the meeting like this so that they can't do this talk and there isn't any give and take and we just listen. It's really much better if you can stand back and really just open up the kimono and have the exchange. Don't be afraid of the exchange. That's what this whole thing is about. We citizens want to give our input. We want to hear back the feedback, the pushback. We want to be able to push back again so that we get that interaction. That's healthy. That helps us get a really good defined code. So we want to make sure that we get there in the proper manner and not just look like we're getting something rammed down our throats. So I really invite you to open those up. And lastly, I hope Councilmember Wynn and Councilmember Orleans are bringing the donuts or the beer to the next meeting because they're not here tonight. So I'm sure you've got something for them to provide. So this is an important interaction that they should be here. I'm sure they have very valid reasons for not being here, but I'm sure there's something they need to provide when you guys meet next time. Anyway, thank you.
Never presided at a public meeting in Roswell in which there was not public input, and I will never preside at a public meeting in Roswell where there's not public input. So in the development process, a lot of the questions were on a one-to-one basis until we could gather all the information. We're at a later phase in that project. We're at the phase in which we're encouraging public input. So I want to thank everyone, those who have agreed with the UDC and those who are skeptical of UDC, for coming tonight. Who would like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please.
Hello, I am Morgan Oswald Eston. I live at 1145 Worthington Hills Drive. Last time I was here, I shared with you guys that I'm a first-time homeowner. I bought my house in Liberty Square less than 6 months ago, put my offer in when I was 25 years old. I'm a homeowner at 26. I shared with you that a week after closing on the house, I found out about the Big Creek Parkway project and the proposal of the alignment to tear my house down. I told you how that I, as a buyer, particularly wanted to purchase a home in Roswell. My boyfriend grew up in Roswell. We found the house while he was showing me where he grew up. He actually moved away, and he went on, became a Marine, served in Afghanistan. We're ready to move back and kind of start lives, and we get this news that the house might get torn down. It was really hard finding an affordable home in Roswell. I don't know how many of you may have been on a budget like I was, but after telling you guys about myself last month, I wanted to kind of share a little bit about more homes like mine. I looked up how hard it was, as I had found, to find a house like mine. So per the tax assessment that I just got, my house would fall into 3.7% of homes in Roswell, valued between $50,000 and $99,000. And per the same census, it would fall into the 1.7% of owner-occupied homes with a mortgage between $500 and $699. So I can own a house or I can have an apartment. I'll take the house, unless you guys want to take it back. So I fall under the 6.6% of people aged 25 to 29 living in Roswell. I couldn't find a statistic for homeowners my age, but I just thought I'd throw it out there that it's, just over 6.5% that are 25 to 29 years old. And I thought about how, we might be the type of people you guys want to attract in the future, and maybe there should be more homes like mine rather than less. And with this Big Creek Parkway proposal, that's going to be 23 less homes if you take the proposal that takes the houses rather than the proposal that takes the apartments. So just keeping that in mind, and rather than devaluing and degrading and demolishing our homes with roadways that we don't want, just encouraging you again to protect them and nurture them as enticing and affordable homes for my generation so that Roswell continue to grow and thrive as a vibrant community. We saw the Boy Scouts sitting here. I'm sure their parents would love for them to stay in Roswell, grow up here, start their own families, and carry on. So now, the other thing is I've shared a lot with you guys about myself, my situation, a little bit about houses like mine, but I have to be honest, we haven't had a lot shared back with us about the proposal. You guys are mentioning at the UDC that there's no sharing of information, there's no time for you to speak. The meetings I went to on the Big Creek proposal, it was a lot of pictures and drawings, and here's a picture with your house there and the apartment's gone, and here's a picture with your house gone and the apartment's there. And we asked if we could ask questions, and they said, no, we're just consultants. These are just designs. We're not taking questions right now. One thing that was told to me one-on-one was that the decision for which alignment was going to be taken would be made in July. July has come and gone, and we don't really know now when this decision's being made. Also, I was told, Mayor Wood, that you were the person making the decision. I hopefully doubt that it's just one person making a decision that at least goes to council vote, but I didn't know if we would be coming back to vote and when we needed to be here, things like that. And then secondarily, and I don't know if this is related or not, but we've had a lot of surveyors in the neighborhood lately. We've asked them as we've driven by, we've stopped and said, hey, can you tell us what you're surveying for? And they say no. Some of these are kind of walking onto our property. I totally understand that. That's fine. They need to do their jobs. But just in the, hope for honesty and open communications and building trust with your residents, I hope that if we do have any surveyors coming for the Big Creek Parkway, that you would be upfront about it, and that maybe we could even get some notification saying, hey, we might need access to your property for surveys for this reason during this time. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thanks. That would be great. Just so that we knew what was going on in our neighborhood and we didn't have to worry about any safety concerns and people just saying that they're surveying. So that was all that I came here to talk to you about today, and I just hope that we can get some more information shared back to us for future. Thank you.
Ms. Tasenbach, when do we expect the question of which alternate to select to come back to council?
We don't have any date for that yet, Mayor. It's still a long way away.
So it's not coming back in the near
future? No, sir. And we're not surveying. I don't.
What needs to happen before this comes back to council?
We are still analyzing the impacts of the various alternatives, and we will certainly be providing that to the public and the council.
There are two alignments. One alignment which is would take out some apartments, another alignment which would be north of the apartments and go into the neighborhood.
Yes, sir. Regrettably, there is no easy solution to this problem, and we've narrowed it down to two.
Now, as I understand it, the federal government requires you to present two alignments.
Yes, sir.
Now, you have received no support on council for the alignment through the apartments, have you?
No, sir.
And the council has expressed to you that they would prefer to see it to go through the apartments, not go through the houses.
That's the general way this is tracking right now.
But we have to study them both.
Correct, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. And I will assure the neighborhood that if the decision were mine, I would choose the apartments, and I expect the council will make the same choice.
Sure.
The last question was, if surveyors are going on to private property, are they supposed to ask for permission to go on?
Yes, Mayor. I mean, I can't say for certain what the effort was, but when we are responsible for those sorts of things, I write a letter that goes out to the homeowners, and it is transmitted. It's basically an access agreement that basically says that this is part of a public process, but basically notifying them if they're doing it for us, that is part of a public process, and that gives them all the contact information if they have any questions. So there's a number of reasons why surveyors could be out there. It's not, I can't say for sure that it's ours. I don't think we're actually in that realm yet, but I mean, I can go back and check.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Who'd
sir.
like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please. The first people I'm going to choose are the ones that are closest to the dais, so if you want to be sure you're heard, you'll move up to the front bench.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jasmine Merkel. I live at 870 Singing Hills Drive, and I'd like to speak on a couple of items. One is to follow up my fellow neighbor, since I also live in the Liberty Square subdivision and very interested in the Killer Creek issues, or the Big Creek issues. Number one, I wanted to ask about the status, because my understanding is that at this point in time there has been no environmental impact statement even submitted with respect to the Big Creek review.
Is that correct? So no impact statement has been submitted. We're in the study process for two alternatives.
Okay. All right. And so one of my concerns with that is our neighborhood is, based on the 2011 census, is our neighborhood is 95% minority. The bulk of our neighborhood, English is not their first language. We're composed of Haitians, Laotians, Russians, Polish-speaking folks, a huge variety of folks. The diversity is one of the things that actually attracted us to that neighborhood. My husband is a native Atlantan, a rare breed, in a city of Atlanta. I moved here from Chicago in 1980. He was born and raised here in Roswell. Went to Esther Jackson, and so lived in Martin's Landing, but then wanted me to also get to know and love Roswell, which I have. And so we bought our first home, and that was the home that we could afford was in Martin's Landing as well. So just again, like my neighbor, we have a similar story. We could afford it. Unfortunately, I think we're a little saddened because the value of our home has dropped significantly after all these years, and certainly by widening Warsaw Road to put in these extra traffic, that's certainly going to take away from the value of our home as well. But one of our concerns is that our neighbors don't know a lot about what's going on, because most of the information is being put out in English only, and so they're not as aware of what's happening in terms of the potential for widening the road, for increasing the traffic in the area, and because it's not coming in a language that they speak or can read. Also, for many of them, their children are the first ones that are English, that are speaking English. They're going to Mimosa Elementary, just like my kids did, and so they are the ones that are doing the interpreting for their parents in terms of information. So the information about what's happening and how that may be affecting their homes is not getting out there. Also, that population is very much a pedestrian population. And you're going to be cutting off, with that proposal, you're going to be cutting off one of our entrances. It leaves only our entrance on Singing Hills Drive to exit out of Liberty Square subdivision, which is almost directly across from the elementary school. That stacks up incredibly to get in and out. We also have a senior center right down the street as well. So you have two very large populations of what we call sensitive populations when we're looking at human health risk assessments. My background is I look at environmental issues, environmental health and safety issues for a living, and when we look at the risk assessments, those are sensitive populations who are more at risk due to increased air pollutants, which we're certainly going to be seeing when you increase the traffic along that road. We also have the pedestrian issue where more of those folks are actually walking, and we have increased traffic with more cars. People are going to be cutting into that neighborhood. Anytime there's an accident on 400, people tend to cut down onto Warsaw Road to try to avoid that area and maybe short circuit that route. We also are going to have an issue with the fact that we've got some beautiful wetlands and green space in the back of our subdivision, and those areas will be lost as part of this big creek expansion. And that's another issue where it doesn't appear like I've not heard any issue with getting the Army Corps of Engineers involved in looking at that issue. And I know that whether it may have been because of the sewers or not, but they've already come through and already clear-cut a good portion of that wetlands without any permission. And so we've got a number of issues happening where our community has not had an opportunity to give advance voice to those issues and to be able to speak out because the information is not coming to them in a language that they speak and understand for the bulk of them. And there's a sense of sort of it all happening and being railroaded. On the UDC, I'll switch to that. Again, as I said, I do an awful lot with smart growth as part of my job, and I've seen it across the nation. One of the things that I am concerned about is that there is an opportunity to abuse the UDC. And again, we're looking at opportunities for massive increases in the number of folks with adding these apartments and into our community, and not really having an opportunity to really carefully plan how we want our community to grow on a more holistic level. I think we would like to see folks that are going to stay. We want those blighted areas to be redeveloped. I'm certainly not against redevelopment. I'd like to build a business here for my encore career, if you will. I know many of my neighbors are looking to have a second career or a third career and stay here in Roswell if they could. But we'd like to be able to do that where we could live and walk to work, maybe give up our cars or drive them less. But if we would be able to do that and have, as we said, the towns, homes, or the condos, but be able to walk to work, be able to walk to the grocery store, and do that, I think that would be a much more suitable opportunity to be able to look at that, make sure that transportation needs are being looked at on a case-by-case basis. We also want to be able to maintain the green space that we have now. Roswell is very well known for the green space that we have, and make sure that that any development is not taking away from the green space and the trails that we have, because that's one of the things that makes our community. And then also that part of our development may increase some of that green space and the riding trails that I know the mayor here big cyclist. You enjoy our trails, and that's another big drawing card for the city of Roswell as well. We're talking about also increasing our, the environmental impact by increasing the density. So we want to be able to take a careful look at that. And so by having just a uniform policy without being able to look at it carefully on a case-by-case basis and having more requirements built into the uniform, the UDC with restrictions or how can we turn developers down, that leaves us more open to those risks or uncontrollable development, and it also leaves us open to not being able to meet air quality issues within the city of Roswell in terms of being able to, our permitting, also our sewers and Clean Water Act issues as well. And so I just wanted to say that these are my concerns based on that, and I wanted to thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'd like to address a question to the city attorney to clear up some misinformation on conditional zoning for apartments, and the concern that there would not be a review on a project-by-project basis for apartment zonings. Mr. Halsey, under the conditional zoning for apartments, which is, I understand, the only way apartments would be allowed under the UDC, is that correct? They're only conditional allowances?
Correct.
What is the review process under conditional allowance for zoning?
Under conditional zoning, there are standards under the UDC that are set out. I believe there are 5 different ones identified, and among those they're generally designed for mitigation of the effect of the zoning on the public and on the city. Council makes its determination based upon these, and it expresses its decision in terms of those factors. Those factors then are appealed if the applicant is turned down. Under the conditional zoning, it's not an appeal where they get a new trial down in Fulton County. Rather, it's based upon the record before the city, and the standard of review is any evidence. So if there's any evidence supporting the decision of the City Council and turning that down, the court upholds that. The tradition in Georgia on conditional zoning is that they are very deferential as long as the council expresses itself with those conditional factors in that decision.
So if under the conditional apartment zoning, which is the only zoning which would be allowed under the UDC, that's the standard. Now, would you also have a public hearing from the Planning Commission just as in zoning?
Yes, Mayor.
Would you also have a public hearing before City Council just as in rezoning?
Yes.
So you have to go through a case-by-case project anytime the council would approve conditional zoning for apartments?
Yes.
And would they outline those, what would be considered mitigation factors?
That's set out in the UDC.
It would be...
It's in Section 13.4.7, Section C, I believe, is the conditional zoning.
Okay, and then all the mitigation factors would be outlined in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Who'd like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please.
Hi, my name is Kendra Cox. I live at 250 Meadowwood Drive, which is in 30075. My comments tonight are directed toward the process by which we've gotten to this point with the UDC. Now, the process for all of you may have begun with adoption of the 2030 Comprehensive Plan, or the hiring of the consultant, or the formation of the UDC committee, and the various work sessions and committees that took place at the end of 2012 and beginning of 2013. Please understand that the public's introduction to the UDC pretty much came less than 2 months ago in August, when that series of informational meetings was held. Now, you've heard from a few other people that the construct of those meetings was somewhat restrictive and somewhat controlled because there were no opportunities for open discussion. Now, throughout the process, it's been made very clear that the public has been welcome to provide input or to attend meetings, planning commission meetings. But you need to understand that there is a huge difference between just holding a meeting that's open to the public and engaging in real outreach and in welcoming open discussion and dialogue, and that is what we have been missing. There's a big difference. Now, the next step is that the public has been encouraged to provide input, but on what? Because the draft has changed so much since July 28th, we might as well throw that out. A new draft came online on Friday, and there was an all-day work session on Saturday at which I presume changes were made. So changes are coming so fast, it's difficult for anyone to keep up. So if you tell us to provide input and then brush our comments aside saying, well, this is a work in progress, this is a draft, then at what point are we going to get a final document that we can actually evaluate? It's really hard to hit a moving target. So the trajectory to the adoption of the UDC from here on out, there was the work session on Saturday, and then there's tonight, which isn't really about the UDC, right? So then we've got, I understand there's a council work session on October 14th. The agenda online says it's about a human resources manual, but I've been told that it will be a work session about the UDC. Then the Planning Commission meets on Tuesday the 15th, at which they're expected to make their final recommendation on what, I ask again. And the Council is going to accept a draft on October 28th. This is all from the website. This is all the list of public meetings. The Council accepts a draft on October 28th, has a first reading of the ordinance and map on November 13th, and a second reading of the ordinance and map and adoption of the UDC on December 9th. Now, in the interim, there are Design Review Board, Historic Preservation Commission, and Board of Zoning Appeals meetings, but either their agendas aren't available or the UDC isn't on them, so it's not clear whether they're going to be providing more input as this process goes on or not. So it's not clear what the boards and commissions are going to have to say, and it's very unclear where the public fits in. So if the UDC is going to be a roadmap for Roswell's future, I don't believe that this approach is going to create a strong, inclusive, and lasting document that we can be proud of and hang our hats on. So I have a suggestion. I'm not just here to complain. The process should slow down. And I have a specific suggestion, which is called the notice and comment period. It's what the federal government uses when they're making changes to rules and regulations. So it would look like this. We generate a final draft, and we freeze it for no fewer than 60 days. During that time, we gather real public input. So we hold workshops with different stakeholder groups, like the Roswell Business Alliance, HOAs, churches, professional and civic groups. Put a deadline on how long these public comments can be received. Usually the federal government is 30, 60, as much as 90 days, depending on the magnitude of the issue. So then you collect the responses, you publish them, and you freeze that for no more than 30 days, and 60 is better. And in that time, you have your work sessions with council, with boards and commissions, with committees, with staff, and all of those will be open, and you will invite the people who made public comment, because you'll have their information. The final draft should address all of the substantive concerns that are raised during the public comment period, and then you get your final approval. So the way things are going now, we're on a very, very fast track to December 9th, and it concerns me deeply, because it's unwise to adopt this document when there hasn't been a thorough vetting of it in its final form. We can't get behind it when we don't understand its ramifications and implications for our infrastructure and character. And we can't adopt it when the design standards aren't available and won't be until the spring. This whole thing reminds me of the Affordable Care Act that we had to pass so we know what's in it. So I'm encouraging you to rethink your approach to the UDC and ensure that it's a document that serves the best interests of our residents and small businesses, because that's who we're here to protect. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. Thank you.
I would like to thank you for coming tonight and giving us your input. I would like to encourage you to hear at the more public meetings that are coming forward. As regards to taking on the example of the federal government and using them for example of how public hearings should be held, I've been working with the federal government for 4 years to try to get approval on a boardwalk along the river. I will never adopt the federal procedure, because the federal procedure is, as we can see in Washington, is a recipe for inaction. This council will not make the decision until everyone is heard from. If the council has not gotten necessary input by December, this council can defer. On the other hand, we've had 45 meetings to date, and all of those public input has been received. I understand we haven't had public debates. We weren't to the process of a public debate because we didn't have a document which we felt could be debated. To debate a work in progress would extend that process forever. So the debate will begin once we have something that the council has worked real hard on to try to put together to get input. We'll start receiving input. We'll receive input until we have a decision. And I want to thank everyone again tonight for coming to this meeting, and encourage you to keep coming to meetings. Any meeting in which there is council members, in which I will be presiding at, there would be public input, and I know there will be at least 2 hearings, if not more, on this issue until the council can resolve it. If you'd like to speak next, yes, come forward.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Michael Haddon of 700 Freedom Lane here in Roswell. Had a few points I wanted to make regarding the UDC, and I was just going to read, but I think everybody has made enough comments that I'm not really going to cover everything again. But I do have some points. First and foremost, I think there's been an underrepresented group here tonight. If you look at the audience, and of course a lot of them have left, the first ones being the Boy Scouts. I think when the Boy Scouts left, the under 40 population in this room dropped by about 90%. So I think that the under 40 population is not very well represented, but the UDC, the objective of the UDC is to create that Vision 2030. Who's going to be here in 2030? I know hopefully a lot of people in this room are going to be here in 2030, but will be fairly high in age. These boomers will, I don't know, be about 70, maybe 80 in some cases. I'm going to be 50-something. So, can't do the math that quick. So, my point is, a lot of the people who would give input that would say, you know what, hey, I want this. I love what Roswell's doing. I love Canton Street. I want to move up here. I live in Midtown or Highlands right now, but I want to move out to Roswell and North Fulton for the good schools, for the great environment, the nice parks. A lot of those people are actually at home taking care of their kids right now. I know my wife would rather me be at home helping put the kids to bed right now. But, I'm here because I think this is very important, and unfortunately a lot of the folks that are my age, they can't make it because they're out with their families. So, at home with their family, excuse me. The points that I'd like to make, a lot of what has been covered tonight deals with density, apartments, crime, infrastructure. Not necessarily the high-rise buildings, but that's come up. I was standing out there. Somebody was talking about 8, 10-story buildings. I think the highest building height approved in the UDC is 8 stories, or not approved, but that would be zoned for is 8 stories, around 400. In addition to the high-rise buildings, potentially dysfunctional schools, choking traffic, and something that hasn't really been covered tonight, but that certainly was circulating around email chains and has been out there on the internet. This word urbanism, which really has a bad connotation from a lot of people, and there's a misconception around it. And I'm going to cover off on each one of those, but. First, density. Does the UDC allow for increased density in certain areas? Yes. Is it going to be smothering? I'd highly doubt it. And as you guys have already gone through, there's conditional approval for apartments that's necessary, that's required as part of the process. So, for everybody to get up in arms about too many apartments or this huge increase in density, you're going to have the opportunity at every turn to talk about that. So as this city develops over the next 10, 15, 20 years, they're not going to be plopping down Canton or whatever they're called, whatever the new apartments over there replacing Fraser is called, Canton City Walk, the inappropriately named Canton City Walk. They're not going to land everywhere, folks. Another point that I'd like to make regarding crime, honestly, we have a great police department. The crime that happens in this city is sprinkled and primarily centered around the apartment complexes. I would like to make the case and challenge you to prove me wrong that the crime that exists in those apartments is not indicative of apartments. When an apartment is built appropriately, where it's gated if necessary, where it fronts the street, where it's in the right environment, that does not dictate that crime will happen there. It's the social and economic situation that predicts crime rather than the word apartment. So, I really am at odds with the concern about apartments and crime. Will we see infrastructure costs increase? My organization, Roswell Next, brought a gentleman named Chuck Marone down to speak in April. Chuck Marone advocates for strong towns. His nonprofit is called strongtowns.org. He really discusses the development patterns that our cities and towns have chosen over the last 50 to 60 years, the post-World War II development pattern that some of you may have heard me talk about. What he really discusses and has come to find is that the walkable and pre-World War II development pattern, essentially what we have in Grove Way, around Canton Street, where you have a denser grid, there's that word, dense, a denser grid, it reduces, without fail, your infrastructure costs. Those are costs to the city, those are costs to the taxpayer. A smart growth model, a denser, more compact model, will reduce your infrastructure costs. It won't increase your infrastructure costs. I already covered the high rises, actually not in enough depth. If you want to bring 8 stories to the intersection of Holcomb Bridge and Georgia 400, please do it. 8 stories, that's, in my opinion, it's going to drive some people in this room crazy, that's too low for the most valuable piece of property in our city. You've got that corridor is the most valuable piece of property in this entire city if it's done properly. And you know what? There's been projects in the past that might not have been proper for that area. They may not have been the right thing to do at that time, but that area, something needs to be done. And if it's got to be 8-story tall buildings there to make it happen, it needs to happen. Density destroying our schools, and I'll cover that with the same thing with the apartments. Density does not create bad schools. Socioeconomic conditions, poor socioeconomic conditions create bad schools. Bringing people to Roswell because they like the schools and they're good families and they want to raise their kids here, that is not going to create a school problem. The mandate of urbanism that's been thrown around on the interwebs, I'd like to set it straight. And I am a new urbanist. I do believe that that's a viable development pattern. I think most of you probably know that. But urbanism is a design philosophy. It's not some guy wearing baggy shorts and a long T-shirt. It's not Atlantic Station. It's not Midtown. It's not Manhattan. Urbanism is a design philosophy that allows virtually everything on the spectrum from a park all the way to Manhattan, New York. You have single family, you have multifamily, you have more density and increasing density. I don't think most people understand that the word urbanism does not mean we're building Manhattan right here in historic Roswell. That's a bunch of baloney. And if somebody's trying to feed you that, they don't understand what that design philosophy is all about. Seaside. Probably a lot of people, you've been there. If you haven't, you've seen the 30A stickers on people's cars. Seaside is the only place I can think of that consistently and genuinely has the idyllic white picket fence that seems to define what everybody in here wants to maintain, the small town feel. I don't know what the small town feel is, but everybody likes it, and they all define it by a white picket fence. So if you haven't been to Seaside, Florida, maybe you've seen The Truman Show, but Seaside, Florida has white picket fences virtually everywhere. But Seaside also is the world's preeminent model of urbanism. It is the world's #1 spot that new urbanists point to say, this is what we'd like to build. So if any of you guys have been to Seaside and you don't want urbanism in your town, I don't understand the disconnect. So the preeminent model of urbanism, providing exactly the idyllic small town feel that the public agitators preach will destroy Roswell, I just don't get it. So if anybody wants to talk about urbanism, please see me after the meeting. The process has been rushed. I've got to disagree with that. Our 2030 comp plan, as all of you know, was adopted in 2011, October 2011. I don't know, what's that, 16? Oh, no. I'm not even going to count. Again, I can't count. Long time ago. Amongst other things, it aims to revitalize declining areas, add additional housing options, update the existing codes to attract high-quality projects. Our current codes couldn't easily accomplish this task, and in May 2012, we brought in Code Studio to assist with the mammoth effort of updating and simplifying them. Code Studio, another firm that actually is a new urbanist firm. So if you want to build Seaside, Code Studio is probably a good place to go to. They can help you do that. A stakeholder committee was formed. That stakeholder committee is made up of probably some people in this room. I'm not on it, but I know there's a number of people in this city that are vested, that have interests, that live here and love this place, that are on that committee. They've worked diligently over the past 16 months to get us to this point. And I've been to some of these meetings. I haven't been to all of them. I can't say whether or not there was a QA or not, but I have never, and other meetings within the city, I have never felt that I could not ask someone a question at a city meeting. Now, not every meeting is going to have a formal Q&A, but I have never, ever once felt that I couldn't go up to somebody and ask a question. And even by email, there's one person, and I won't name them by name, that doesn't respond to my emails. But other than that one person, and I've emailed dozens and dozens of people within the city, they all respond to my emails. So I don't know that there's a communication gap. I think there might be an involvement gap. And, I just looked at it. The city has 4,400, something like that, Facebook followers. They have 2,600 Twitter followers. I have no idea how many people are on the city newsletter. But communication, guys, could it be better? Yeah. But it's not like the city's not communicating with people. There's a newsletter. The newsletter is thorough. If you want to know what's going on in your city, go to the newsletter. I just think that if folks really were interested in being involved in this process and didn't know about it, they're not paying attention. And the other thing here, the kicker is that almost everything that's in the UDC could be done today. It would just require a lot more effort between the city, developers, building and property owners. And you know what all that does? That just wastes time and money. The other thing that it does is it discourages people that want to actually come to this city and make something happen. So, you know what? Mr. Broadwell mentioned that all the municipalities that have adopted UDCs over the past several years. And I think, Ms. Russell, you mentioned that awesome Alpharetta is kicking our butts in certain areas. He forgot to mention that awesome Alpharetta has a UDC.
We're not hearing from the floor. We're not hearing from the floor. We're not hearing from the floor. If you wish to respond to him when he returns, I'm not hearing from the floor unless your hand is up.
Sorry
I'm
for the
not
confusion,
hearing
folks.
from anybody from the second hand up until I've heard from everybody in this room. So if someone wishes to talk out of order, the policeman's going to escort them out. You may proceed.
Sorry for the confusion. And I think my final point is, the UDC is going to help Roswell execute on its vision by reducing red tape, clarifying our vision, enabling the private sector to more efficiently and effectively put capital to work. And, one other point, the folks that are under 40, everybody that I've talked to is very much in favor of what this city has been doing, has done over the last 4 to 5 years. And it's a generality and probably anecdotal on my part, but I talk to a lot of people and they love what we're doing here in Roswell. And I personally think that this will help us take that even further. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, come forward, please.
Hi, my name's Heather Pendry. I live at 9095 12 Stones Drive. 30076, and I am over 40. I apologize for that. Anyway, good evening, Mayor and Council. Like everyone in this room, I only get 24 hours in each day, and like most people in this room, I don't want to spend my time doing other people's jobs. I'm tired of picking dirty socks up off the floor of my teenagers' rooms. And I don't want to become the council watchdog. I simply don't have time to double-check every fact that is communicated to me by the city of Roswell. I would like to believe that I was in a partnership with my city, one that is made up of mutual respect, open communication, and collaboration. But unfortunately, I don't feel that way. And now, like many other Roswell residents that have been misled or miscommunicated with, I'm having to spend my precious time digging to find facts, attending city meetings, and piecing together the truth to protect my home, my family, and my future. I have several concerns, the first of which is the lack of communication the city provided to my neighborhood when a 400-foot communication tower was to be erected 138 feet from the street across from the 12 Stones front entrance and our new $100,000 neighborhood pool. We were given no notice, no signage, no letter, nothing. Had I not seen the one sentence in the June Roswell Neighbor, I still wouldn't know. Cox Road folks, who are multi-millionaires, were treated the same. And now I've learned that the Waller Park Water Tower folks had a similar situation with no notification. So this is the modus operandus for the city of Roswell. It's not an isolated incident. It's the new Roswell. I have it on public record that the mayor believes the council meetings to be public, and therefore adequate notification of public affairs that might affect folks. Seriously, how many seats will we need in City Hall if this continues? Secondly, I'm concerned about the integrity of the information that was ultimately shared with my neighborhood. We were told that the Sandy Plains towers were 400 feet, and it was used in multiple presentations as an example of what to expect, and that was untrue. The Sandy Plains tower is 300 feet, not 400. We were told we had to have a 400-foot tower, and that's not true. Fulton County, who's working with the same Motorola Solutions, had a design for a 300-foot tower in our area. We were told that Fulton County was 18 months behind the NFR SSA in getting a contract for an upgraded system. That's not true. Within 30 days of our meeting, Fulton County had a fully executed contract. Rich DiPolito asked for an independent consultant to look at tower heights and how they might be reduced. And what we got was a Comdex hodgepodge of information. Let me be clear. Mr. Bethea worked for Motorola for 10 years. He's not an independent consultant. He was hired by the NFR SSA to implement their plan, whether he likes it or not. So his job is to defend their actions and their plan. We were told the U-Storant location would be difficult to build the tower on. The real reason it would be difficult is because John Wieland Homes wants to develop the adjacent property, and I'm sure he doesn't want a 400-foot tower in his development's backyard. So why am I here? Well, I feel like here we go again. The UDC meetings have been dog and pony shows with no real input. The code is complicated and difficult for the general public to understand. It's constantly changing, and we are having to rely on our public officials to tell the truth and do what's right. And unfortunately, many of us in this room don't have a great track record with the city doing what's right. I believe it's never too late to have a positive outcome. I appreciate very much what Kendra Cox did propose tonight. I'm sorry that she used the word federal government because most of us are so frustrated with the federal government, and now a lot of us are feeling that same way about our Roswell government. But I do believe that that was a good model of what we could do to slow down and have true public input on a plan that's actually been set. With regard to the East Roswell Park Tower, I don't even know what control council even has at this point. I feel like the control has been given carte blanche to the NFR SSA, or NFRRSA, I apologize. What I would ask is who among you will ensure that the tower is in fact built at the lowest possible height? Fulton County says 300 feet will do, and fiber optics says that 200 feet could work with 99.97% accuracy, and there is a hookup for fiber optics on the property, not on Holcomb Bridge, like Mr. Bethea said. And who will push to move the master site to the fleet yard where it belongs, both due to its central location and its zoning? And who will make sure the tower remains at least 500 feet away from Fouts Road? I hope you are all saying, well, I can at least do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next? Yes, sir. Gentleman right here in the striped shirt. Was your hand up? Yes, sir, you may come forward.
Good evening. My name is Tim Passons. This is my wife, Sarah Passons, and we live at 8 Legacy Drive in Legacy Village subdivision. And this is our daughter, Brennan Passons. She's not able to be with us this evening. She died 2 years ago next Thursday. Since Brennan's passing, we've been on a mission to make a difference for her. The night Brennan passed away, she had an asthma attack, and my wife was headed to North Fulton Hospital. We live right up Woodstock Road. And when she got to the corner of Highway 9, Brennan fainted. And Sarah had the presence of mind to take a right towards Fire Station number 1 rather than take a left and risk making it to the hospital. When she got to Station 1, my son, who was 12 at the time, realized that all of the trucks were gone, and Sarah called 911 while my son frantically banged on the doors looking for help. Eventually, Rural Metro showed up, and Brennan never made it that night. A few days later, our son Dalton called me into his room and said, "Dad, I don't understand something." And I said, "What?" And he said, "The ambulance, it came from behind the fire station." I said, "How do you know that?" And he pulled up Google Maps and he said, "Look, there's nowhere else it could have come from. It was parked behind the fire station." So we naturally began to ask questions. It took 3 minutes and 47 seconds for that ambulance to drive around Fire Station number 1. I challenge anybody here, hold your breath and start counting. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. As we asked questions, one of the first folks we called was Chief Burnett, and we had a meeting with him, and Chief Spencer was there as well. And about the best answer we got was, "Well, that's a good response time. It's better than average." 3 minutes and 47 seconds. And over the past 2 years, we've learned a lot. We've learned that Rural Metro has a terrible response time. Not just in Roswell, not just in Milton. It's as far away as Arizona. So we keep asking questions. One is, why Rural Metro? We don't know. 2 is, why is the ambulance parked behind the building when it could be parked in front? There's nothing that restricts it from being parked in front. And maybe if it was, they could have been there in 5 seconds. Granted, the trucks were gone. Granted, nobody would know if the ambulance was there or not. But hey, what could it hurt? We've gone to Chief Spencer. We've gone to Mrs. Love. And we've gotten nowhere. So that's why we're here tonight. We just need to make a difference. And it's real easy. We're able to spend millions of dollars on towers. We're able to get a used fire truck 1,000 miles away within 36 hours, but we can't manage to have an ambulance parked in visible sight. We were told tonight that we spoke with Chief Spencer that, well, that's not a permanent station for rural Metro. So they can't be there. Well, we went to rural Metro, of course, and spoke with their area manager, and he in fact told us that no, that is a permanent station for our ambulance. We do have circuits that they cover one another on, but that is always a spot for that ambulance. And if you drive behind that station number 1 any day of the week, any night of the week, you'll see a rural Metro ambulance, unless they're out on a call. So again, we're here to make a difference in Brennan's name.
I would just like to say, as her mom, I never wanted her to be a poster child, anything but something wonderful. She was a very smart, giving, kind, loving person. And as a citizen of Roswell, 11-year-old girl deserved better. She deserved better than that. And as her mom, I will always have to live with what I heard on that 911 tape to make sure I said everything that I could have possibly said to let them know how serious of a situation my known 11-year-old daughter with asthma was having a sudden and acute attack, and that she had fainted, and that I didn't know if she was breathing or not, and as I was begging for instructions for CPR. I have to live with knowing that there was nothing but a building between me and rural Metro ambulance. And I'm not here to confront anybody. I'm not a confrontational person. But I know if I had died that night, I know my daughter would stand up and do anything she could if she thought something was wrong and that her mom should still be here. And I just cannot fathom why two entities such as Roswell Fire Department and Rural Metro Ambulance can't come to some sort of agreement. I've walked that station so many times, and I've watched the bays being blocked by different vehicles, fire trucks, the maroon SUV that has the Roswell Fire Department emblems on it. There's plenty of areas on that site, and apparently you all met there and decided to donate this fire truck and had this all approved within 36 hours. And it would be wonderful if you all could go out there maybe with Mr. Spencer and Mr. Burnett and walk the grounds. I've found several areas that an ambulance could park easily and completely see the front of the fire station where I pulled in by the double doors that go into the old museum that my son was banging on. And they could have seen me pull in and they could have immediately said, you know, ma'am, can we help you? What's the problem? And when you're an asthmatic, you don't have time to waste. I mean, anybody who's familiar with asthma knows it won't stop. You know, we were using her rescue meds at home, and in fact, she was having a paradoxical bronchospasm, which is much more severe. So she needed medication and attention immediately, sooner rather than later. So those 3 minutes and 47 seconds meant a lot. And I'll never know exactly when my daughter passed away. I was not in the ambulance. 2 firemen jumped in the back. I was driven to the hospital by a fire or a police deputy, and when I next saw her, she was in full code, and she was not there any longer. So I just ask you to please consider, I've been asking for 2 years. This doesn't cost you any money. It's just a little thought and a little time and a little effort to protect 11-year-old little girls or a 50-year-old man that is having chest pains driving home from work one night and pulls in the station and can't get himself out of the car to go, pick up the 911 phone or bang on a door. I mean, people don't know that rural metro ambulance returns to that station and parks in the back. And just as I didn't know that, the Roswell Fire Department ambulance would be gone when I pulled in, but we teach our kids, and I myself went there as a safe haven, looking for help, looking for a paramedic. So I'm just begging you to please consider it. It could save a life. If anything, it could save a life. I don't think it would hurt anything, but I think it could save somebody's life.
I'm sorry for your loss. If
Thank
you
you.
wish, I would be glad to meet with you and Chief Spencer to discuss this.
Okay,
great.
that would
Thank
be
you.
wonderful. Thank you very much.
If you wish, you can get with Chief Spencer or call my office and we'll schedule a meeting.
Okay,
That'd be
that would
great.
wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Sylvia Morrow Noken, and I reside at 9055 12 Stones Drive. And tonight I just want to touch briefly on 2 topics. On September 11th, this council voted to approve a 350-foot communications tower on Fouts Road. At the September 11th meeting, there were a couple of bits of misinformation that may have impacted this vote. First, Mayor Wood, you repeatedly said that in order to reduce the tower height to 200 feet at Fouts Road required an additional tower. That was inaccurate. Run 77 did not require an additional tower. It required fiber optics. Secondly, Chuck Bethea of Comdex stated that Run 77 suffered significant blockage at 200 feet. That was inaccurate. If you look at his documentation that he provided at that meeting, and I'll hand these to you shortly. This is his documentation. Run 77, microwave path issues, alternate site at Lackey Road, clears path. Your vote for a 350-foot tower was flawed because it could be done at 200 feet with no blockage. Additionally, Mr. Bethea said there would be additional significant cost to the city because of the distance they would need to run a fiber optic cable to access this tower to the Morton Road Tower. In fact, there is a fiber optic node at the corner of this property and Fouts Road, the very property the city of Roswell acquired and on which the Arts Center, Roswell East, is situated. The post is there for anyone to see. I can't help but wonder if with correct information, this council vote may have been different than it was. If it sounds like sour grapes here over a 350-foot radio tower, yeah, it probably is some of that. But it's also the recognition that we had to sit here and listen to someone give misinformation to this council without an opportunity to rebut it, and then watch this council cast its vote based on misinformation. I hope that at least, if nothing more can come of my comments here tonight about that vote, you'll at least consider the fact that sometimes rebuttal information is a useful tool. where someone presents information as an expert and doesn't have all the facts straight. Another subject I wish to address with this council is the UDC. I object to the UDC in its form. It deprives the public of their input into matters of public concern, and that is never the way a city or a government should function. The impact of the UDC is on Roswell generally, but on neighborhoods, communities, and individual property owners specifically. I know we pesky citizens make your jobs more difficult. I get that. We're not always easy to get along with. And we come when we have something to complain about. I will say thank you, by the way, for paving the pathway through the park. My dog and I enjoy it every evening. It is easier for you to work with a handful of developers whose expectations and requirements are few and simple. Give us what we want so we can build what we want and we can make our profit and go home. We citizens want to live here. We want to enjoy the community that we've been a part of building and making and creating. Toward that end, we think we're partners with the city in continuing development in a thoughtful manner. It is undisputed that the UDC in its current form is going to increase density in the city of Roswell. Well, the world's increasingly dense, and you can take that any way you want. There is a need to be thoughtful about how we develop property in this city. I live over in East Roswell. I know we're not supposed to talk about East and West Roswell. But in East Roswell, we do have a much higher concentration of apartments than elsewhere in this city. My child, my daughter, attended Roswell City, the schools here in Fulton County in Roswell. She got a wonderful education. I'm very proud of her. She's a pre-med student. But I also know she was part of a target group within the school system over there, the TAG program for talented and gifted children, isolated from the bulk of the students in the school system because we had such a transient population in East Roswell. I don't get that, you know? For what reason do we have to isolate our brightest students from the general population? There's something wrong with that. We need to think about our development. I agree. We need apartments in this city. Every city needs apartments. But how many do we need? And when is enough? And what is the quality of the apartments to be built? How are we to protect against the transient nature of apartments that impact our schools? I don't know. Better minds than mine have got to address this situation, but I think we are in a rush to do this. I understood the under 40 crowd doesn't think 2 years is a long time or a rush, but for those of us over 40, we like perspective. We like to stop and think and analyze, and we are old enough to recognize that you can make some pretty bad decisions in a hurry. So please slow down. Give us the opportunity to review the final document. I will tell you I wasted, and I call it wasted, 5.5 hours of my life last week reading the UDC, only to see that it was newly drafted and posted on Friday, and now it's still not a static document. I don't have a lot of time either. I have that same 24 hours everybody else has. But we need to get a document that we can take a look at, that we can analyze, that we as citizens can understand. We're not obstructionists. We just want to understand what it is and to have some input in what this city is going to look like going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please. Correct.
Lauren Fields, and I live at 865 Singing Hills Drive. And I'm speaking this evening to remind you of what I've said before about Big Creek becoming Big Creek Park. In the year 2030, I envision Roswell to be the outside 285 loop of Buckhead, the best place to live, because we have great location, and besides that, we have green space. So to lose this opportunity to make this wetlands into the most beautiful green space between Alpharetta and the Chattahoochee, where the boardwalk hopefully will be built by then, would be a shame. And so I just want to say again, instead of a parkway, say a park.
Thank you. Who'd like to speak next? Yes, sir, come forward.
Hello, my name is Buck Jordan. I live at 1300 Worthington Hills Drive in Roswell and Liberty Square subdivision. I'm coming to speak in opposition to the Big Creek Parkway study that's underway. We keep getting told it's a study and it's something that may or may not happen down the line, but it seems like the cog keeps ticking one step closer to something approaching approval, even though it's something that won't happen in the next 5 or 6 years, so we're told. But there are major drainage, water drainage issues where it's a creek culvert goes under Warsaw Road where a roundabout is intended to go. And I can say that the Liberty Square residents are really concerned about this alternate plan that puts 12 to 14 homes under the wrecking ball. We also understand that on the same token, if we push the roadbed further into the apartments, that interferes with those people who live there, and that's, okay, they're transient, they live in an apartment complex that may not be the fanciest apartments in Roswell, but at the same time, they need a place to live too. Further down the road, you have massive flooding in homes that already exist in Liberty Square. So I think there's a lot of issues here, and while the study is not at the point where they're getting environmental approvals, they're not necessarily looking right now at clearances and other kinds of zoning issues that might come up in the future and watershed issues. We really want to just make a loud statement that we're not in favor of this road at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Who'd like to speak next? Yes, sir, come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, thank you for listening. My name is Steve Vashy. I live at 9015 Willio Road in the older part of Roswell. And my world exists in the older part of Roswell, but it sounds like you've got a real hornet's nest here going on. But I just have a couple short issues. Yes, how's that? Any better? I want to talk about the road race that was in my area last month called the Area 13.1 road race. I don't know if any of you know what that was. I didn't know what it was. No one got any notification. Of course, when I say no one, I live in an area where nobody else lives. And what happened, my wife and I were coming home from the lake one day, and it was maybe about 7 o'clock in the evening, and came the Azalea Drive and Lower Roswell, and the road was blocked. And some pretty young girl comes up and says, "You can't go past here." I go, "What are you talking about?" She said, "We're having a road race tonight." And I said, "Well, no one told me about the road race, and I live a half mile down this street." So I got to looking about this road race, and it originated in Texas somewhere, and they bring it to Roswell, and they make some money with it. It's quite expensive. It goes on at night, and people wear black light stuff, and they got cowbells going. It's like New Year's Eve. And I go to bed fairly early. This went on to 11 o'clock in the evening. So after the girl told me I couldn't go by, I said, "Well, let me talk to one of the other police people." I thought she was a policeman. And so she brought another guy over, and he said he was the director of transportation. And I explained to him where I lived, and he said, "Well, we got a problem here. He said, just wait a minute. He got right on the phone, he called somebody, they brought a motorcycle cop up, and they escorted us home. Now, they really handled it really swell, but the road race, I don't want to see that down near my house. They can have it on Martin Road, they can have it out on Stroop Road if you'd like it, Jerry, but in the evening and in the late hours, I just don't want to see that road race. Like I say, you all probably don't know it exists either. And the other item I have tonight is Charter Communications. I don't know that they have an office in Roswell, but I had some trouble with my equipment, and they told me I had to drive to Duluth. That was 38 miles over to Duluth to go to the Charter office. Now, I was in the council chamber 20 years ago when Roswell said, hey, you can close the office down here in Roswell. But I think since you guys kind of hold the strings on Charter, I would suggest that you encourage them to put an office here in Roswell so people don't have to travel that far to get their products or service. It shouldn't be any great difficulty. And that's all I have.
I would disagree with the wouldn't be any great difficulty part. I agree with every other statement that you made about Charter Communications.
Well, gosh. I mean, I was here in the beginning when we got TV money and stuff from Charter. Do we not have a relationship with them anymore?
I'm not going to comment further on Charter Communications.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Charter, like other cable companies, has gone to a state charter. We no longer have control of them. We get our percentage, but they are regulated by the Georgia Secretary of State's office.
So maybe I should send an email down there, huh?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Who'd like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please.
Hi, my name is Beth Hampshire. I live at 1600 Oakfield Lane, but I'm here to talk about my business, which is at 114 Bullock Avenue. And I just wanted to agree with almost everybody who spoke tonight about the impact for our neighborhoods, our schools, our infrastructure, all of that. I think that the one group that is not heard from at all is the Roswell business owners. And I know that Canton Street and Alive After 5 is everybody's big excitement for Roswell, but I'm wondering if you have sought any input from the people who are making downtown Roswell go and are making a living down there, what they see right now as the impact. We're already overcrowded. We have customers who can't get to us, they can't park, clients calling saying, I can't make my appointment because I'm sitting in traffic. So any additional density on Alpharetta Highway, which may be great, is going to impact the current businesses. And no one has asked me from this council as a business owner how things are, how it's going to be, but I'm guessing, is that part of your plan? Is there going to be any business input into the UDC? Because it's 2 months away.
To specifically answer your question, should that be addressed to Nancy Diamond or Alice Wakefield as far as business input? Who would be prepared to answer that question?
I mean, I can tell you that we've done some meetings in the area of the historic shops. We've talked to the Historic Merchants Association. We have dealt very closely with the Roswell Business Alliance, so if you're a member there, or even if you're not, if you're just on their mailing list or email list, you should be getting information on that. But we can absolutely make sure you are if you're not.
Well, I am, and I think, though, that an open informational meeting would be great, where the business owners can understand. I can't understand the UDC.
Sure.
Even if I had learned last week, it would be null and void. I was running a business this weekend, so I can't keep up. If there was a final document, though, it's okay. Whatever Roswell does, I may not agree, but I do have to make a decision for my business. Do I move it? Do I stay? Do I relocate? You know, the developers who want the other side of Alpharetta Highway are calling us, asking us to look at rentals that don't exist. There's no plans. I mean, there's a lot going on. So I just think maybe a more back and forth, open information where we can ask questions and understand what's happening, because it's not just my life, it's also my business that's going to be affected by the UDC.
Absolutely, and I think you'll find that we've been having that conversation, at what point do you have the public input, and then you create a document based on what you're hearing, and then you have the public discussion? And that's where we've been moving to, but if we haven't gotten to you, that's not good either, so we will definitely get you on that. But the Roswell Business Alliance has had a couple of workshops, and they have more scheduled to do that, and they have input stuff. They've been sending out information, I know, on their newsletters, but we can absolutely work on doing more public information.
Is there a final date then when I can say, okay, this date has passed, I can now sit down and read the UDC, and I know that this is what it's going to be?
I'm happy to tell you where our hope is that the end of October there will be a published, what are we calling it? We actually put it on the council agenda, even though it's not a legal move, to get more public input, because we find a lot of times that's when people tune in better, so we're actually putting it a month out. So our hope is that the end of October it will be in some draft form ready for discussion. If it's not, we'll push it back. So I'm not going to tell you we're going to have it absolutely if it's not ready. We need to account for the fact that we do have a work session on the 14th. Planning Commission meets the 15th. There's no way they can review those documents. We're looking at doing an additional meeting with them. Depending on when that is, that could affect the timeline. We're trying to publish the best information we have, but we're not trying to push it ahead of when we're ready.
Just to remind you then, we need time to review it. It can't just be a month.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you something else. As long as this council is hearing public input, which will be up until the second reading of the ordinance, there will be continually changes in this document. So you're saying, well, there's some time it'd be frozen in time. The only time it will be frozen is when it's finally passed. Because as long as public input is being heard, I anticipate this council will be fine-tuning this document to try to make it better. And I expect that's what the whole community wants.
Okay.
Any further? Who else would like to speak? Yes, come forward, please. Correct.
I'm Vivian Benson. I live at 209 Prospect Street here in Roswell. And I wanted to say thank you for, I live right next to what used to be a bank, Bank of North Georgia, and they were trying to put a used car lot in there, and you voted against it, and I really appreciate it. Anyway, this UDC, I don't know really enough to even talk about it, but I know as far as zoning and code, there's not been very much that's improved my life. I live right there in the heart of everything. I've got a used car lot adjacent to my house. I've got a used car lot that backs up to my back fence. They come over the fence every now and then and get my gas can. It's horns and noise, and, I've kind of gotten used to it, Pure is now across the street, Highway 9 from me. And they've got two massive speakers on their roof. And they have cut it down some. I think the sound limit, they call it a 7. I don't know if that's a 70 or 700, whatever. And I've had the police over. But it is directly into my backyard. I garden a lot. I don't like TV. I'm not an indoors person. I love all our bike trails. I've enjoyed those. So I'm outside a lot. And at 6 o'clock it starts. And it's just like the car lots, they appeal to, they do what code asks them to do, and then they go right back to the same thing. And what they do is they start the music. They say it's from like Wednesday through Saturday, but they play on that roof Monday through Sunday. And as the evening goes along, it's sort of okay. You can still just hear it in the yard. But as the evening goes along, it gets louder and louder and louder. By 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you can turn on every TV in the house. And I don't watch TV, but I've started to. And to try to drown it out, and you can still hear them. If you call them and ask them to turn it down, I've never said an ugly word to them. We've had meetings with them. They're very rude. They'll actually curse you if you call. and then they'll actually even turn it up. And the police come over, and they're opposed to it too, because some of their homes back up to that, and they tell us to call the police. We've got a wonderful police department too. I really love our police. And they say to call the police to build a case, you know, because they want it gone too. But what they'll do is when they leave, they turn it back up. And, you know, it's horrible living there. I've lived here for 40 years. And I love Roswell, but I am thinking about I was a partier too. You know, I did my partying in Buckhead. I was a flight attendant for a major airline here. You know, but who puts a bar on top of a roof? Why do we have to have that? Why can't they do their drinking and their partying inside? Why do we have to be exposed to it? It's like having a jukebox going on, you know, next door to you. What's the point, you know? And plus, it looks bad. You're coming down the road, and all these drunks are screaming their brains out. They're all in the parking lot. They're hanging over the railing. I mean, it's pretty bad. So anyway, I don't mind them being there. I'm glad we get those tax dollars. I understand that business is business, you know. But couldn't we just get the music inside?
Well, Roswell, as you know, has a noise ordinance.
Yes, sir.
And the only way we have to enforce that the way we typically enforce that enforcement is through citizen complaints. Have the policemen been following up with your complaints?
What do you mean by following up?
When you call the police department, are they responding?
Mm-hmm.
Are they then making their case against Pure?
Oh, they're really good. They're great. They go across the street. They see the police at Lucky's, you know, and then they tone it down. And they told me things like, they said if it's over a 7, that they can play it for as long as 10 minutes before they can do anything to them.
But this is what Mr. Halsey would have to cite you the law, but typically the police department tries to first, and our code enforcement, try first with warnings. And if the warnings are not successful, then to write a ticket. So I would encourage you to follow up with the police department, because they are empowered to enforce the law which this council has passed.
You know what, Mayor, it's not that they're breaking the law with the noise. It doesn't matter. You got speakers on a roof directly at my yard. It's lower than what it has to be legally, you know, but it is in my yard. I wish you could come and hear it. You would not believe it.
Well,
it's unbelievable.
Councilmember Diamond wishes to comment.
Yes, ma'am. One of the issues that we've discovered is that, well, we've known, we're just quantifying, is that the measurement that we use to cite people or to measure is not accounting for the low frequency, the boom, 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 which I think is probably a lot of what you're hearing, because it goes so much further than the higher frequency does. So the Chief Grant is not here, but he can tell you a little bit. Oh, there he is. He is working on gathering some data and trying to get some norms, because this is not the only place where this is an issue. And that is a part, we'd like to either be part of the UDC or part of our code once we have the data that knows what's acceptable to your property line and how we can make that an extra tool the police can use. They have the measurement right now, but our code doesn't allow them to use that lower frequency measurement, and I think that will help us get to where we need to more quickly.
I do. I understand what you're saying, but the point that I'm bringing, it doesn't matter. I can hear the conversations in my yard. They're out in the yard on a roof, and it just doesn't matter. It's a rowdy, huge, drunk crowd of people screaming into my backyard until 11 and midnight even. You know, and as the night goes on, it gets, because they feel like people are indoors, they get louder and louder. It's unbelievable. But anyway, I was just hoping we could get it off the roof.
We hope we'll improve the situation as far as activity on a piece of property. We cannot go beyond what law this council passes. Our police officers can only enforce the law as it's passed. Councilmember Diamond is looking into how to strengthen it. Whether or not it solves the problem in your case,
right. In other words,
I'm not sure it can.
Yeah, I kind of figured that. I am selling my home. I'm moving out because of it, because I cannot live in my house with it. There's no way I can. And, you know, I hate it, but...
I hate it too.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to speak next? Yes, sir, come forward.
My name is Ed Sant, and I live at 1345 Parkmont Drive. And happy 5th Monday of the month. Thanks for being here so late. I imagine rare are the times when your decisions make all parties happy. My position has not changed from the last time I was here sharing my concerns about the Big Creek Parkway proposal. Deciding to run a bridge road parkway capable of handling 4 lanes of traffic right through a wetland, offloading an unimaginable traffic flow, density into our little corridor of residential homes, is not a great idea for all the residents that live around there. The impact of increased traffic density through the Warsaw corridor will severely choke off the livability of our diverse and affordable neighborhoods while doing very little to reduce traffic at Holcomb Bridge, Georgia 400 corridor. From hearing things tonight, once you add in the new Unified Development Code that might give Holcomb Bridge Road a lot more development, the increased density, I don't really know what to say about that because I'm not sure if the whole plan of the bridge road even takes that into account, that if it's really going to grow, then the traffic counts that have been proposed are even going to go higher. It has a feel from what little bit I've read the last day or two for the UDC is it's going to create a more friendly atmosphere for real estate developers and commercial landowners. And sustainable growth included some developments of mixed use with a more robust density footprint. That's not necessarily bad things, but they need to be structured with a lot of foresight and due diligence so they cure more livability problems than they create. It just seems like the formula is just a higher density for higher profits, which means the city's residents will suffer while developers get a better return on their investment. So I think if that wholeness aspect, if you guys can just maybe back off, as people were saying, give it a little bit more time. Sadly, some of us are not up to date on it. We need to read more and get up to date on it, and then come to you and ask you with questions. So I'm not against higher density per se. In fact, I would say that trying to live a footprint in a life for the future generations, that 6,000 square foot residential homes with 2 6,000-pound vehicles sitting in the driveway, that's not a great thing, as well as livability in the long term. So there is a balance out there. I do think that higher density works. This new urbanism with the gentleman who spoke earlier tonight, it's not a bad thing, but the unified development codes which are popping up around the country with new urbanism is kind of the movement behind it all. I see those cities as having mass transit well developed, well in working really well in those areas to allow then mixed development to happen, because you have then a mode of transportation that lets people move around. We're suburbia here. We have the car. I'm not sure if mass transit's ever going to really make it here other than just an occasional MARTA bus, but that's what allows something like mixed use to really take off. And if you take a city like New York City, it's the greenest city in the world because of mass transit and because actually more people walk than they actually use mass transit. And I know that we want to try to create these little nodes that you can have walking, but in the big scheme of Roswell, it seems like people are still going to drive. And I don't know what the answer is, and I don't want to just say no to everything, but I hope it does get studied further, and then you can kind of look at those infrastructure things like mass transit to try to make it work better as the city grows, if it does go up in height over the next 30, 40 years. I'm not sure people want it to be a Buckhead that live here. I don't think I want it to be that. I don't want it to be also perimeter as well. But, it's expensive real estate, as the gentleman said earlier, and it's probably going to get developed in some way, but how can we do it in a manner that makes it be as livable as possible for everybody? As far as the money spending on the bridge proposal, if you want to just stop studying that now and then give the money to the folks out on Fouts Road so they can come out with the best possible solution for the radio tower, I'm all for it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Who else wishes to speak? Yes, sir, come forward.
I wasn't sure if you were talking to me.
Yes, sir.
My name's Eric Schumacher, 145 Prospect Street. As you know, I'm interested in being part of the solution and getting more involved. As I've been looking at our UDC and the process that we've been using and attending a lot of the meetings, I'm seeing that we're having a lot of change fairly late in the process, and what I'm hearing tonight, from you, Jerry, that we're going to see a finalized document only at the final reading. That's a concern for me. My career has been quality assurance for a lot of years now, and when we see large projects going through this amount of change near the end of the project, there's a risk for mistakes, and the mistakes that we can make in the UDC are hard to reverse. If we give people a zoning on their property that perhaps was too generous or was not appropriate for that area, we may be into it in a serious legal situation later on. I've been doing a little research on other cities that have been using code studios, and I've noticed that Raleigh, North Carolina, passed their UDO earlier this year, and it went into effect in September. They've chosen to actually take a phased approach to implementing. So rather than implementing both the document and the zoning classes and the map at the same time, they've actually chosen to just adopt the document itself and then spend the next 18 to 24 months remapping. So they brought over approximately 70% of the properties. There were a lot of our properties into the UDO in September. So things that directly migrated without a lot of change came over, and those are all governed under the new UDO process. But over the next 18 to 24 months, they're actually going to remap what they're calling the legacy zones to the new zones. So they're going to be doing it in a conservative way to begin with. So as they look to remap, they're going to give some of these properties the same height they have today, or the same density they have today, and then allow some of those property owners to actually apply for other zoning classifications and heights that were appropriate for the areas that were identified in their comprehensive plan. So it's I think from what I'm seeing and from a lot of the transparency they've provided in that community and the involvement of the citizen advisory councils there, it looks to me like a much safer approach. They're achieving what I would say is probably the same end game, which is to revitalize areas, but it's probably not going to be threatening some of the existing businesses or be really scary about, did we make a mistake on our code? Because they're taking 18 to 24 months to actually rezone the properties. They're going to see the biggest increase in changes. So, they can take that time and involve the citizens of Raleigh and do it in a way that doesn't impact their infrastructure as well. I really recommend that we take this approach. I have been in the UDC meetings and I've seen the fatigue that you guys are showing. I've heard comments like, I don't know, where's this property? This is what people are asking for. We should just give it to them. We should make them happy. This kind of thing concerns me because in some cases we may be giving people something they shouldn't really have. The area where Charlie Brown was, for instance, being rezoned at one point in this process to CX, 8, potentially 10-story buildings. When I looked at that code, just to understand what that might mean, it looked like 100% lot coverage to me. That's a concern. I don't know if that's really the plan. I looked at some of the history with that property. It looks like there's been a lot of purchases and changing of hands, and so they own about 70 acres over there. I'm sure they would love to see 100% density, 10-story buildings over there because they could really maximize their value. I think it's great. But I'm concerned about our infrastructure. Fire, safety, stormwater, obviously traffic there. And a lot of the infrastructure changes that we have planned are several years out. So I worry about us making a change and giving an incentive like that to that kind of area where we're just not prepared for it. What are we going to do when this big company comes to us and says, we've got 70 acres here, you told us we could have CX, 100% density, 10 stories, here's our plan, but no, we can't give that to you because we don't have fire safety, infrastructure, there's going to be traffic problems. So I think, again, a phased approach where we really consider spending the time necessary on the code itself. Little things in the code I think that people aren't paying attention to. Jared, you mentioned that there are not going to be any more apartments. Only apartments where they're at today, or conditional, right? So you can't just put an apartment complex in or apartments in. But what I was reading in the latest draft was we've got accessory apartments and cottages coming into our neighborhoods, our two neighborhoods. So while we say we're not going to have any apartments, people think apartment complexes, we're really opening the door to some of our, existing neighborhoods to create duplexes or apartments in our neighborhoods, and people will put cottages behind their houses. This can potentially affect property values. So I think that we need to spend time looking at these things closer and whether this is what people really want. I would like an apartment behind my house for my mother or, my future growing children, but I can't have one. So when my neighbor puts in an accessory apartment or a cottage or carriage house under this code, my property value is actually going to suffer because I don't have that space behind. Or, people down the street are going to have these kinds of things in their yards. I mean, it's going to be more cars, more people, blight in the backyards, less green space, things like this. I want us to focus on these things. I think we're actually getting distracted by, the scary aspect of, a Charlie Brown situation. That's a very real situation that could happen with our UDO or UDC, for instance, in the future. But I think that we do need to focus on getting the code right first. And if we're not spending time in these meetings going over these hundreds of properties and trying to figure out and understand, well, what are we giving this zone? Oh, should we give them this zone? Should we give them that zone? And the zones are changing and the properties are changing. It's a messy process. When I see this in a company, this means very, very low quality. This means errors. This means a failure at the end of the project. And I don't want that to happen. I actually want to become part of the solution here. So again, it's working for Raleigh. I would recommend that we actually contact some folks in Raleigh, bring them down. They worked with Code Studios. They've already implemented. They saw almost a 50% the last 2 weeks of August before their code implemented. They saw 49 requests from developers under the old code. That's basically I think it's more than 50% of what they see in a normal year. Right? We should be aware this is probably going to happen, but if what Jerry is saying is true, we're not going to see, a finalized document until the final reading. It doesn't give anybody an opportunity to really look at it. I mean, it's a long document. There's a big map. It's hard to get straight how these things all interrelate. It's hard for anybody, and I see you guys struggling in these meetings really trying to understand it. So I think we need to cut the scope on this thing, focus on the code more, consider having, like a lot of people suggested, a time where we really spend looking at change control. We should finalize a document, prioritize what kind of changes we can make in certain phases, track those changes, make them all public, make sure people can comment on whether they want things in and out of that document, and truly lock it down for a period of time to give developers, business owners, the people of Roswell an opportunity to really provide feedback. I was at a Rotary meeting the other night and saw a lot of you there. Actually, it was in the morning, noon, lunchtime, and a lot of great people there. I understood that they got a presentation from Nancy on the Unified Development Code. And a few people came up to me and said, I'm really concerned. I've got a business in Roswell. And, the UDO and the remapping looks like, the people next to me are going to be getting something that I don't have. Or I'm concerned that, what does it mean when this great new development goes up at the end of my block? Are we going to enter a new phase of blight in Roswell? I mean, the things that are sort of successful today, on a smaller scale, mom-and-pop shops, short buildings, they don't have the multi-use. Are they going to be the new blight? Because we're bringing this new development in. I think we have to be sensitive to our existing business owners along these corridors in these nodes and revitalization areas. A lot of our blighted shopping malls have gotten that way because of transportation problems, flow issues. We need to address that. We should help our existing businesses first. Without a doubt, there are areas that we can address. But I think if we take a phased approach, we should really do that in a strategic way and measure the results and then adjust as needed. I mean, that's really in the comprehensive plan. So, sort of taking that hat off and putting my hat on of individual citizen in Roswell, in Prospect, where I live, we have a property over there that is being rezoned or suggested being rezoned under the UDO, and that's 110 Woodstock, and it's right next to the old Roswell Cemetery. It's a historic cemetery. The cemetery is being rezoned from part of it is R2 today. 110 Woodstock touches R2 property in the cemetery, and 110 Woodstock is being suggested as RX. A lot of my neighbors are concerned about 110 Woodstock going from R2 to an RX. Formerly it was suggested as a DX. And the comprehensive plan, it doesn't suggest a change in this area. And I understand that there isn't a application for change for this property. I understand that it's a well-known developer bought this property in April. But we're concerned, and I bought my property, I'm about 100 feet from this property. I bought my property looking around and understanding what the zoning was around my property. So I'm concerned about my property values when this kind of change can be made without any public input. I think this is happening in a lot of places in the city, but I'm particularly concerned about this location because there's actually nothing on it today. It's a green space. So I don't think that we need to give it any incentives. It's also next to a historic area, and because of the zoning combination that we're getting here, and this is important to what I was saying before, we need to look at how this can impact special areas in our city. The zoning combinations that we can get can actually create problems. So we've got a historic cemetery here that has graves up to the property line. Since 1836, we have graves there, and they're right at the property line. I know there's probably some graves in 110 Woodstock, but anyway. RX doesn't need buffers to Civic, which is what the cemetery is being zoned to. So literally we could have a 5-story building next 5 feet from a historic grave. Further, because RX is nodes and corridors, you could have barbed wire and concertina wire and chain link fence all around that property. I'm concerned. This is our neighborhood. There are houses on this block. I think that we need to look at and make more public the changes we're suggesting, how we got to them. Again, phased approach would allow us to focus more on the code and then make a process where we remap more public to offer more public input on how we form our neighborhoods. I understand that we're looking for to streamline our process. Streamlining our process shouldn't mean removing checks and balances from our process or our process is shorter. Okay? Streamlining our process should mean keeping our checks and balances but making that more efficient, doing that in a better way to ensure we still have the checks and balances. So, thank you very much for your time. I want to be part of the solution. I do suggest that we take a phased approach to implementing the UDC, excuse me. The UDO out of Raleigh, they could probably offer us some help and leverage some of the learnings they've had getting to their point and what their experience is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your input on 110 Woodstock Road. That is why we haven't locked the project down yet, because we're continuing to hear input. We're encouraging your input. I'm sure Nancy was taking notes on this. So it's not possible. If we had locked the project down, as some folks had suggested, we would be criticized because we would cease taking input if we lock it down. So you see the balance. We're trying to continue to receive input to get to this point so that it's settled.
Absolutely.
And then come forward. But I will tell you, as long as the public is giving input and this council is responsive, I think we'll be trying to improve this. Now, on the other hand, if you say we should wait till it's perfect until we finally adopt it, it will never be adopted. You will never have a perfect unified development code. There has to be a point in which you make a commitment, because without amending this thing, without coming up with a new code, we're going to be working under a very contradictory and confusing code, which leads to not just the developer having a difficult time, but our citizens having trouble understanding it and our staff even having trouble influencing it. So the whole purpose here is not to make things easier for the developer as much things as to have predictability and simplicity so everybody understands this code. Thank you for your input. Who'd like to speak next?
May I add,
you
sir?
may.
So I understand what you're saying. I am concerned that, I've worked for some large corporations on some large projects, and, when we have a lot of change and there's a decision after a lot of change, there's an opportunity to miss things, and there's some distrust in a system that allows for change right up until a decision is made. So if people have an opportunity to be involved and provide feedback on something that's final, they feel better about it. But if we are involved and then changes happen right before a decision is made, I think it breeds a lot of distrust. So again, to your point, we shouldn't take forever. That is why I am suggesting that we de-scope the mapping for now, and really try to use a quality-driven process rather than a date-driven process. So today you're driving towards a date in December, right? I think it's good to drive towards dates. But at this point, I believe de-scoping the mapping is important to enable to try to actually meet that date, regroup and try to focus on perfecting the code, get a time where you're going to really lock it down enough that you can get some real feedback from people. Like someone said, she spent 5 hours looking at this stuff. There's a lot to go through. There's a lot for all of you to go through. There's a lot of opportunity for error. So I recommend locking it down, having a formal change control process where you can track the changes you actually need to make. So when people go back and review, you can actually see what you want to change, and they can provide feedback just on those items. Again, should be quality driven. If it needs to slip a couple of months, it's probably really not going to impact anything. But you're still going to achieve a higher quality piece of code to work with. So that's my feedback.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Who'd like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Lori Henry. I live on Manhattan Drive, and thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. There have been a number of disturbing comments this evening, and I won't remark on all of them, but, it started off with Joe Piontek stating that he has read this document, and he would challenge all of us to read this document. And I have read this document, and my comment to Joe is, say it ain't so, Joe. This is far from perfect. Absolutely far from perfect. My contention is that there has been a select group of people that have been drawn into this process. They have been asked to opine on that process. The general citizens of Roswell have not been asked. Someone implied that if you're plugged in, have half a brain cell, that you should know this is going on. I don't think anybody here would argue that I am not plugged in. I am plugged in. I did not know what's going on. In all honesty, I would have not known what was going on with the UDC had I not gotten involved recently. And, one of my comments is you all are talking about revitalizing things. This is what we've got to do to make the city move. And we're talking about upzoning a 3+ acre piece of property next to my home. Raw land. Wooded lot. What kind of incentives do we need to provide to them to go from R2 to RX? I've heard some very cavalier statements. Well, it's between a water tank and a cemetery. What else are we going to do with it? Well, it also abuts my property, and I have lived in the shadow of that water tank and that cemetery for 30 years. It has not affected my property values. I don't foresee that it will in the future. We have been building million-dollar homes on Minhinnet Drive. This piece of property is prime property. It's a block off of Canton Street, but we're going to offer incentives to a developer for no reason, cutting out all of the input from abutting property owners and our ability to negotiate on the impacts of that property or what happens on that property. So I respectfully request that you do not upzone or backdoor zone during this UDC process. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to speak next? Yes, sir, come forward.
Can I have this overhead, please? Mayor Wood, City Council, Lee Fleck, Martin's Landing. Thank you. At one time, there was comfort knowing there was a well-thought-out, well-written, clearly defined, comprehensive 2030 plan that was developed with extensive input from the public. As far back as 2011, when the Strategic Economic Development Plan was presented to the city, it was apparent to me that a conflict with the 2030 Comprehensive Program plan was brewing, with a likelihood the long-term economic development strategies would dilute the 2030 plan. As previously mentioned, and worth mentioning again, according to the City of Roswell's website, the Unified Development Code is a single unified tool that will help make Roswell become more economically competitive by increasing the certainty of the application and development process. Well, that statement alone pretty well determined who the winners and the losers were. Truth of the matter is that UDC is exclusively focused on apartments with higher density, more urban living for the economic benefit of developers and the city's coffers. And this code will further stress city services and add more traffic to our already congested roadways, negatively impact our schools, and encourage more crime in our neighborhoods. Additionally, it is well documented within Roswell's own crime statistics that higher density apartment complexes result in an astronomical increase in criminal activity. Routinely, our apartment complexes change their name to mask their crime statistics to attract potential occupants. I've used city crime statistics to testify before the State House Judicial Committee that has enacted at least 2 laws that I've testified with. Thankfully, tonight, this administration is being forced to listen to the public relative to the UDC in a manner unlike the public meetings which were presented by the Community Development Department which I was vehemently opposed to when I attended them, and I will be vehemently opposed to them in the future if they are conducted in the same manner. These city-sponsored meetings utilized an unethical method known as the Delphi technique in an effort to deceive the public as well as yourself in believing this administration was achieving consensus on this controversial topic in a group setting. The turnout tonight obviously proves that was not the case. This city's public format was nothing more than a deceptive process which has become an acceptable modus operandi for municipalities to give the illusion of soliciting public input by using an expert to present the city's case and then breaking out into little meetings to avoid open public discourse. No open questions and answer period were provided during these city-sponsored public meetings that would have allowed those in attendance the opportunity to ask questions or to listen to others' questions and hear the city's response. Participants were asked to write down their ideas and disagreements on comment cards to be turned in and compiled for general discussion at a general meeting when it reconvened. How do you know that your ideas on your notes were included in the final results? You don't. You may realize that your ideas were not included and come to the conclusion that you were probably in the minority. Recognize that every other citizen member in this meeting has written his or her likes or dislikes, and they were and had no idea whether those ideas were compiled in the final results. You don't even know if anyone's ideas are part of the final conclusion presented to the reassembled group as a consensus of public opinion. The Delphi technique is an effective way to squeeze citizens out of the process and manipulate them into the desired level of consensus while neutralizing opposition. In essence, during those public meetings, Roswell citizens were being manipulated. And contrary to what Mayor Wood said earlier, when I asked the mayor about the lack of public exchange during the very first East Roswell meeting, his response was, well, that way, no one can grandstand. That's correct. Roswell mayor considers public exchange a nuisance. Now, last Wednesday's issue of the Roswell Neighbor, the city's legal instrument, I could not help but to notice that Councilwoman Diamond her comments failed to include the need for public input in the process. She talked about, quote, the need to create regular communications between boards and the mayor and council, unquote. Quote, it will give our boards and commissions more clear directions, unquote. The need to, quote, educate ourselves, unquote. Quote, listen to the experts. Nothing, absolutely nothing about public input. Allow me to digress. There was a time, although it was short-lived, when the city recognized volunteers. And not just with lip service. The city sent out invitations, had a little brunch at the senior center. Mayor, you came back, said some nice little words, but that was long past. So aside from not acknowledging the public, you really don't even make a concerted effort anymore to thank the many, many volunteers who are the ones who really make this city as great as it is. Instead, you, our public servants, choose to jaunt off to South Georgia for a luxurious retreat. What happened to find it all in Roswell? Candidly, the worst part of the UDC is that in one fell swoop, thousands of properties will be rezoned with one vote without public notice process that currently exists. Now, I was going to put this in the record, but I won't spend the time on it. But I'm sure that you all got the letter from Martin's Landing Foundation, and I think that their concerns exemplify exactly what I have discussed in my presentation. Mayor, I've also read your response, and I candidly think it's a whitewash. Now, my next topic I want to talk about is that East Roswell Tower. I was really disappointed in this council's recent decision with regard to the East Roswell Communication Tower without investigating further into what were obvious alternative site locations that were presented for the very first time at the final meeting that you all voted to put it right where it was originally proposed. Municipal judgeship. Your legal departments claim that the Georgia law usurps Roswell City Charter is candidly an empty argument. Had the state had any issues with Roswell City Charter, they would have confronted the city long before now. We have had an elected municipal judge for the last 30 years. System functioned quite well according to local churches who were quoted in the Roswell Neighbor. I'm sorry, but because of the mayor's decision to supersede parliamentary procedure on August 22nd, you all missed the opportunity to have considered placing the question on the November ballot to authorize a change in the city charter, which you will likely have to face anyway. The city charter is very straightforward relative to the replacement of a municipal judge. The council has the right to appoint a chief judge pro tem until citizens select the next municipal judge at the polls. Therefore, any member of council who votes to appoint a municipal judge will be in violation of their office and subject to recall. The water plant. I noticed the city has solicited bids to supply materials to build the water plant on Dobbs Street. It was in this week's newspaper. This council should be ashamed for its lack of transparency and honesty with its customers. Total misuse of your authority and the long-term financial liability you are saddling on such a small portion of the population is inexcusable. And now, last but not least, the reason I'm really here tonight. Darn it, what did I do with it? Oh, here it is. You know, I could not help to notice in the legal instrument Wednesday, in the same article that I referred to earlier, that Council candidate Kendra Cox did in fact touch on my next topic when she stated, there are structures and rules that serve to foster understanding, not to silence and demean, as well as her comment that she supported open public input as opposed to informational meetings, which not only discourage open discussion, but restrict or even forbid it. During the August 26 Roswell City Council meeting, pertaining to a motion for deferral of the election or appointment of a municipal judge, I was denied the opportunity to speak by Mayor to a legitimate council motion when the mayor stated that he would not open the floor to public discussion on the motion. To my surprise, Mayor Wood denied me the right to provide council some basic information and basically avoid accepted parliamentary procedures that have been in effect for 137 years. And for the council to have allowed the chair this bullying behavior, you leave me alternative but to present this evening some of the basic tenets of Robert's Rules of Orders. When members of the public come to city council meeting only to be denied the right to speak at the whim of the mayor, then that becomes grounds for a no confidence vote for the conducting of your meetings. Therefore, I'm here to justify my actions on August 26th. You all may have seen one of these, or know what that is. It's 700 pages, Robert's Rules of Order. It's the 11th edition. And it is the current authorized edition of the classic works on parliamentary procedure. Now I want to start at the end. Well, I want to start to justify my actions. On page 209, if a member wishes to move a reconsideration while a motion for the previous motion is pending, or after the previous motion has been ordered, he seeks limited recognition by raising and interrupting the chair. Any member here has the right to interrupt the chair with a point of order. It is so stated on page 31. If at any time the chair makes a mistake, his attention will be called to it by raising a point of order, and he should immediately correct the error. Calls of question by members from their seat, i.e. the chair, denying public the right to speak to a motion for the previous question are disorderly. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about what's going on in the Senate recently. You hear the word cloture. Cloture was invented and presented to the U.S. Senate in 1918 after World War I because to end discussion and argument over the Versailles Treaty. Now, Chapter 16 of Robert's Rules of Order discusses previous question. That is a call to the question. The previous question is a motion used to bring the Assembly to an immediate vote on one or more pending questions. Its adoption does this with current exceptions. Standard description characteristics takes precedent over all debatable and amendable motions to which it applies. Number 2 can be applied to an immediate pending debatable or argumentable motion. Number 3 is out of order when another has the floor, must be seconded, is not debatable, is not amendable, and requires a 2/3 vote. In ordinary bodies, the requirement of a 2/3 vote for ordering the previous question is important in protecting the democratic process. Now, I could waste more of your time and everybody else's time here, but I'll tell you what. When the mayor threatens to have me removed from this body by security when I'm following appropriate parliamentary procedures, I have a real problem, and I hope you as a council have a problem when he does it. Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. Yes, sir. Yes, you may. My corner, you need to ask, but my corner is open territory.
There's more food downstairs.
Actually, you can put your, if you have try to work on
How much longer?
so you would recognize mine. I'm trying to stay out of those
Part of it was mine. I never got to change all the lyrics. While I was back there, I got them all changed in Legistar. So what are we now wrong? Well, the 14th was changed. Officially, after the Saturday work session. After the work session on Saturday,
Get up here.
announced that they were going to do the meeting on the 14th and 19th. I just never got to it. Yeah, so they're all, the work sessions are all changed around and whatever, they're all changed. In the morning. So I'm out tomorrow for a class. How are you? I'm fine now.
Whether one of the other. No, they didn't.